Okay, so good afternoon everybody, and I'm Councillor David Fuller and Chair of the Licensing Committee. Just some housekeeping rules first of all before we start. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please could you evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairways. Do not attempt obviously to use the lifts. We assemble at the Queen Victoria statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust fire marshals, please remember to sign in and out of the building after today's meeting. I presume some of you have signed in. Live streaming, may I draw to your attention the fact that this meeting is live streamed from the camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and they are recording on the Council's website. The camera will capture the backs of those making deputations, and there will be some footage of them as they approach and leave the table, and the people entering and leaving the room whilst the meeting is in progress. Members of the public also are permitted to record us if you want to in the meeting, and understanding that neither deputations, people that make the deputations, should be recorded if they do not wish to be recorded. So if you do not wish to be recorded, could you please let us know before you come up to the table, please, ladies and gents. Please use the microphones in front of you when you're speaking. Okay, so that's that bit first of all. So as I said, welcome everybody, and first of all I think it's best that we introduce ourselves. Everybody knows me, Councillor David Fuller, and I'm Chair of the Licensing Committee.
Good afternoon everybody, I'm Ian Lyon and I'm Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee.
Hi, I'm Leo Madden.
Hi, I'm Gerald Allen Jackson.
Steve Pitt.
Simon Potter, Service Manager for Adams Morey.
Jane Didino, Local Democracy Officer.
Nikki Humphreys, Licensing Manager.
Good afternoon, my name is Ben Attrell. I'm a solicitor employed by the Council, and I'll be advising the committee whilst they make their decisions today.
Hello, just to aware, we've got a couple of councillors just a couple of minutes late. I've just read out about the fire alarms, if they should go off. I'm sure you're aware of those councillors. Would you like to just introduce yourselves, please, and just to remind you that we are live streaming today.
I'm Councillor Tom Coles, Ward Councillor for Fratton.
Thank you. Councillor George Fielding, Ward Councillor for Central Southsea.
Again, thank you very much. So, looking at the agenda then, on item 1, apologies for absence. Could we have any apologies at all, please?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Benedict Swan, David Tompkins and David Ashmore, and Councillor Claire Rudy said that she'd be a little late.
Okay, any more apologies, members?
Councillor Jason Bashackley.
Thank you.
And I'm subbing for Councillor Hashmore.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So number 2 on the agenda, members, declarations of members' interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members, please? Okay, please record none. Number 3, minutes of the previous meeting. There were pages from 7 to 10. Can I have a proposer and seconder, first of all, please?
I was there, so
yes.
I'm happy to propose it. Of course.
Okay.
I read, learn, inwardly digest, and I hold them close to my heart.
Okay, does anybody want to second that, just for the record, yeah? Councillor Madden? I'm the only one here, I've read them. Yes, I'll second it. Okay. That's done. Okay. So number 4, this is recommended of the... sorry?
Am I the only person who was there?
Just as a matter of clarification, it can still be noted in any event.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so...
Excellent.
Doesn't matter, we only need one. So you'll do, Councillor, that's fine. We've had one, we don't need 2. That's fine.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Councillor Harris. Thank you for coming. We're just on to any declarations of interest, and just to remind you that we are web streaming this afternoon. So any declarations of interest, Councillor?
None at all, Chair. Sorry for my lateness.
No problem at all. Thank you very much. Okay, so now that's finished up with number 4. So this is about recommend that minutes held on 6 agreed and correct record. Okay, so anybody want to talk on that one, number 4? Just no, all happy with that? Okay.
Didn't everyone talk about it?
No.
Yes, I do.
Yes, I just said over this end. Yeah. Okay. Yes, please.
Sorry, Chair. I think this is an extremely interesting and good report. It's very in-depth and it's very long, and it took me a long time to read it and look through the various things. But what it tells us is that in 2019, Portsmouth City Council is well outside the general, the national way of doing things, and the longer we leave the changes that it's recommending and don't follow them as much as possible, eventually, when we get to item 6 or 7, where there's a recommendation that in fact it's going to be almost a national statutory guidance, statutory command rather than guidance, I think we're not going to be ready for it. So there are a number of things that come up from the report. If we look at page 34, 2.9, the Department encourages licensing authorities to create a cohesive policy document that brings together all their procedures on taxi and PHV licensing. This should include, but not be limited to, policies on convictions, a fit and proper person test, licence conditions, and vehicles. We do have that, but the point I have been making for quite a while is that if you look at our policy, it tends to be in favour of operators and against the interests of individual drivers, where if you just do a fairness test, it strikes me there's hardly any mention in our policy of how we treat operators, but there is a lot of prescriptive stuff about the drivers. Now, clearly operators aren't driving, but they are facilitating a means by which people go on the road and serve our public. And if you go to the Rotherham events recently, the taxi drivers involved, it is clear to me, if not to everyone else, that there must have been an element of collusion with the operators, the private hire operators, who themselves must have been aware of some of the things that were going on, and we in this council do not look closely at it. So in the recommendations, for example, that we are asked to send back to the DFT, we agree with almost everything except whenever it talks about an operator. So if you look at where we have, I'm trying to get to it because I can't actually, right, look at page 71, 21. The draft statutory guidance recommends that PHV operators should, as a condition of licensing, be required to keep a register of all staff that will take bookings or dispatch vehicles. Do you agree with this recommendation? Seems to me a perfectly sensible thing, but no, surprise, surprise, we are protecting the operators in this city, and we are not applying to them the same kind of strict requirements that we make on drivers. And I'm sorry, I don't think that should happen. And I refer to a case that the licensing subcommittee heard not long ago, where one operator, in the evidence that was produced to the committee, a member of the public had complained about being propositioned by a driver, and in the conversation that was recorded, and of which we had a transcript, she said, this complainant said, it is well known that drivers do this kind of thing, and I just thought it was something that happened, and a friend of mine did it only a few weeks ago, etc. And what is clear, and was clear from the evidence that was provided, was in fact the operator received hundreds of complaints of this kind, and the policy says that they should be sending that to our licensing committee within 24 hours, and it doesn't happen. And the licensing team representative sat there and said, we wouldn't have time to deal with them if they all came in like that. But that's what the job of our licensing committee is, and actually the team is to look into complaints. We can possibly discount them very quickly, but if you don't hear about them, you don't get them. And in this set of recommendations, they are suggesting that in every car, that every private hire vehicle or hackney carriage, there is a mandatory piece of information that says how they complain, how a passenger complains directly to the council and not necessarily to the operator. And I think we should be looking at this much more carefully. So I think 21, for example, I disagree. We should agree that there's a requirement to keep a register of all staff that will take bookings or dispatch vehicles.
Councillor, before we go on, I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Sanders has come in. Sorry, just no problem. Did you have any declarations of interest, Councillor?
I was going to wait until Ian had finished, no, apologies for the lateness. I was at somebody's retirement do, so I'm just late.
And just to remind you, we are live streaming.
Thank you very much. I have nothing of interest to declare.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So I think can Nikki answer that point, that specific point? Yeah, if she does each point, because the trouble is, if we go through 20 of them, we're going to lose out and we'll not be answered it. Okay.
Well, it's just the way we want to proceed, because, I mean, Ian's making some valid points, but I would have thought we go from there are recommendations within it, and I think maybe we should go through the recommendations, and then as we hit them, say whether we're for them or against them. Most of them actually were saying, this is from the consultation document, that we agree with. But there's some that people may not agree with, and I'm with Ian. There's some that I've picked up. I thought, well, that needs a bit more focus on it. That needs a bit more detail. So I would suggest, Chair, that we actually start at page 64 and go through the recommendations. Whether you would do that page by page or one by one is up to you, but I suggest page by page.
Are you happy for that?
Yes, there are 33 of them.
Right, 1 second.
I don't know whether you've got the same pagination as we have. 60, I think you've got an earlier version.
Chair, I'm sorry to interject.
Yeah.
I note that Councillor Udi's just arrived, and previously a councillor had joined the table during the middle of debate. I had previously advised Councillor Udi, who had notified us that she was likely to attend late, that if she joined during the middle of discussion of a particular item, that she should stay in the audience until the conclusion of that item. But I think we have barely commenced discussion on this point.
Yeah,
and so I think actually it would be fairer all round for Councillor Udi just to come and join the table now.
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
Unless any party here wants to object to that member joining at this stage, but
no,
Darren join.
Come on,
please.
come on.
I'd actually object to the fact that she's not sat at the table, to be honest, because I think we're discussing minutes. We're not even into policy.
No, we are not discussing minutes.
Yeah, but I know we're not deep into.
We've done the minutes.
But what I'm saying is that we're not deep into policy.
We have started substantive discussion.
I thought we were going through.
But I think we're still at a very formative stage of those discussions, and I think there's only literally one point about the guidance that's been raised that can be summarised for Councillor Udi.
So far.
So, Councillor Udi, welcome. First of all, have you got any declarations of any interest at all for the meeting? No, okay.
No.
And the
Chair.
That's all right. And the other thing, just to remind you, we are live streaming this afternoon. Okay. That's okay. So we're going back to what page we're starting off. We're going to go
64 of ours.
Right, so take us through it.
64. Well, in that. Sorry.
My suggestion is you ask, has anybody got anything on page 64, and if not, move on to 65. I mean, because Ian's on 65.
Colleagues, can I just clarify for anybody who may have the licensing policy at home whilst live streaming? I think what we're referring, Leo is right, and I think that's the best way forwards. We're referring to Appendix C, which is the Council's response to the DFT draft statutory guidance. So we're looking at what is page 64 of the 497-page agenda, or page 2 out of 14 of the appendix, to ease anybody who may have the paper in front of them, or failing that, the rest of us.
Right, so 64. Everyone's happy with 64? All right, okay. Now, number 65. Right, Councillor Lyons, first of all.
Okay, well, the first is in recommendation 5, it says that the policy is that the licensing authority has never required its policies to apply respectively. Apart from that, there shouldn't be. Apart from the fact there shouldn't be an apostrophe in the word "its." If we go back to page 39, of the pack, which is, I don't know what page of the report from the DF, it might be page 13, and 2.29, and it actually says that it's important to remember that any changes in licensing requirements should be followed by a review of the licensing. That is not to suggest that licenses should be automatically revoked overnight. For example, if a vehicle specification is changed, it is proportionate to allow those that would not meet the criteria to have the opportunity to adapt or change their vehicle. The same pragmatic approach should be taken to driver licence changes. That is the way that the government is suggesting that we can look at this and be fair to put things retrospective. There is another example, which you haven't cited, or the policy hasn't cited, but that is in the mandatory or the statutory guidelines of what people should be disqualified for or not allowed to apply for a licence for, and that is if they're caught using a mobile telephone. And that is actually in on page 60 and 61 of our big pack. But it's the suggestion that if we discovered, for example, that something was now illegal, that is now illegal, but we shouldn't be doing anyway at all, that we can't be retrospective is bizarre. I think that we do need to apply our licence. If we change our rules, we should apply them across the board. We shouldn't say, well, and with a proper lead time and transition time. I just have to I don't understand why we are disagreeing with the government's recommendation.
Can I interrupt you there and just ask for Councillor Sanders, please? Just wants to add something.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I broadly back what Ian is saying in this. I think there are there's all sorts of guidance which all overlaps with each other that we've got here today. So the task and finish group that comes later also refers a lot to what's in here as well. So there's lots of things all together. I agree. I think that reading the DFT guidance on this actually means that the position that Nikki otherwise rightly outlines is less of a problem than it could have been. I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that in the original DFT consultation document, which is page 35 of our 497-page agenda, in paragraph 2.16, it specifically talks about the burden of proof. So it says an applicant or licensee should not be, quote, given the benefit of the doubt, unquote. And if it's a 50-50 thing, and I know the thing that Ian is referring to earlier on, that, to me, supports the decision that was taken, and I don't want to go too far into that. But you've got those two things, Nikki, and I think that with the DFT stuff, that actually gives us a bit more comfort in terms of doing this. Otherwise, I understand the problem, which is you're thinking, oh Lord, I'm not going to be able to do this. But I think that does give us a bit more comfort. And secondly, what I wanted to add was that what if DFT brought this in anyway? Because it looks as if they will. And then what do we do? And I think that there was a lack of a sort of a plan B in there. And plan Bs I always find helpful. Otherwise, people just tell you what your plan B is anyway, I find. So I think that would be helpful. So I agree with Ian. I think the position's slightly better than it looks because of the guidance. And I think with the burden of proof in the document that we've got, and certainly we can't afford to go against that, we've got to check and see what our plan B is anyway. So I would suggest that the guidance is okay, but express some doubts around whether it's needed or not, but also make reference to the burden of proof. And finally, I would respectfully suggest, Chair, that you encourage Nikki and the team to come up with a plan B for when the government puts this in, because it looks as if they will.
Thank you. Nikki, did you want to?
If it would assist members as you go along, I'm quite happy to give some general advice. In terms of the proposed response for retrospective application of policy, I just wanted to give you some bit of background that over the years you do change your policy from time to time, but licence holders have an expectation, and I'm going to use the vehicle example that I used in the response, that if you have an age policy, so people invest in a vehicle, that they have an expectation because of that policy that they will have a certain amount of time that they will have that vehicle for licensing purposes. If the committee then amended that policy to say, well, you were on the road, you had an expectation of 10 years, but we've changed our policy and now it's coming back to 8. The way that the draft guidance is suggesting is it's saying when that licence comes up for renewal the next year, officers or the licensing authority would say, no, you may have bought that vehicle 12 months ago on the expectation of getting 3 years or 10 years out of it, but we've changed our policy now and you need to replace that vehicle. You haven't got those 2 years. And I think that was the reason why that suggestion was put forward, members, because that doesn't assist the trade and our policy in terms of applying retrospectively. Certainly if you apply, and again, if you decide somebody is fit and proper and then your policy changes, because you've said, oh, well, now we're going to add another 3 months, do we have to review every year somebody's suitability to hold a licence? And that's why the retrospective element of it becomes difficult for the trade and difficult for the licensing authority itself. In terms of the status of the guidance, I mean, certainly we're in a draft stage at the moment, and this is all about consultation and getting feedback from licensing authorities, from yourselves. But yes, there will be a statutory level to this under the Policing and Crime Act, so you can use this to defend your decisions, but equally the statutory guidance makes it clear that you can depart from this guidance if you feel there are exceptional reasons to do so. But you're not totally bound by it, but obviously you may be able to consider local circumstances to depart. Is that?
Yeah.
Just Councillor Lyons and then Councillor Madden, please.
Sorry, yeah, if that were the case, then we'd never have any legislation, because it's obviously going to change a position that currently exists, and it would be bizarre to say, well, we can't change legislation because it might affect some people or not. It's just sod's law that some people will get affected by it and some won't. I mean, would you say, therefore, that we wait for a teacher to retire or die before they are removed from a school with if there's a new director that says that if they've ever had any conviction for abusing children or something, that they have to be fired? That if that were a new law, and would we just wait for the people who currently are working in the schools no longer to be working there? No, of course we wouldn't. We have to apply laws, and we have to understand that when we introduce new regulations, it is going to inconvenience some, and but it will protect the public more, probably. I mean, and so I don't think it is right to say that we cannot, as a council, do things. It isn't retrospective anyway, because the vehicle isn't, unless it's already 10 years old. I mean, if it's 11 years old, then perhaps. But it means that it makes a commercial effect on somebody who's got a 7-year-old car, whether or not they change it then or not.
Did one of you want to just add to what Councillor Lyons said there?
I think
just bring it forward more so people can hear, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I think the point to note is that what we're looking at is draft statutory guidance. It's not draft legislation. It's not going to create a statutory law. It's not going to create offences. It's merely going to create guidance which will inform your decision making and inform your policy processes. So just to reiterate that point.
Okay, Councillor Madden, you had your hand.
Sorry, just to remind members that the consultation document is about protecting users. So that's really what we're talking about. I mean, because I've had similar experiences as Councillor Lyon had, sitting on panels where there have been improper conduct by a driver. Yes. But on this, it talks about. It is a bit. I'm with Nikki a bit on this, because it talks about all issued license being reviewed, whatever the policy change was, and I would thought they would have to say they'd have to be substantial. I would also agree with Ian, though, because I think if we allow a vehicle for 10 years, I think that 10 years stays. Because we have to say, it would be unfair to the driver, the operator, to at some stage say there's been a change in policy, unless government says every vehicle has got to be bought every year. You have to have a brand new vehicle every year. And therefore it's imposed upon us. But I think if we've got the wherewithal to do it, if we grant somebody whatever period for a vehicle, I think we would stick to that. Even though we might say that from now, I think we've said from now on, I think we'd have to honour whatever pledges we've given before, but then say, well, this is going to be our new policy because of.
Nikki, did you just want a quick...
That's totally the approach that I took, Councillor Madsen, when I suggested that response.
Councillor Pitt, you had your hands up, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Surely a pragmatic compromise to this situation would be to say that the licensing authority has never and will never apply its policies retrospectively, excepting changes made to nationally which affect directly affect public safeguarding. Because what we don't want to do is do things with this impacts on people who bought vehicles in good faith, with the expectation of being able to run them for a certain period of time. And as somebody who's worked in the licence industry for a very long period of time, the government flip-flopping on stupid things like air cleaning machines in pubs, telling everybody to go and get them because it would stop them bringing in no smoking in pubs. We all invested thousands of pounds, only for the government 18 months later to change the legislation and say they were going to ban smoking in pubs. Cost me personally about £4,500 at the time, I seem to remember. So I'm looking at this in terms of how this could impact on people who've made business decisions, because these are business people, for the right reasons at the right time. So I think if you exclude those particular areas from this policy, that doesn't stop us from having a look back at anybody who, because of changes to the law have occurred around public safeguarding and the stringent requirements of that we could revisit people for that specific reason, bearing in mind that this whole document is supposed to be aimed at that. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody want to add to Mr. Atkin? No? Everybody? Okay then, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, could we just, back to what, I just said all that, he might have said it in more legalistic terms. But could we talk, see, all licences should be following changes. I think we need to say, well, you know, it has to be substantial changes, doesn't it? Because otherwise, any little bit that comes down to... So can we put that in the reply as well? And can we also say that we would want, were we as a local authority, as a licensing authority, given a commitment for whatever period for a vehicle, that we would need and want to honour that?
I can see Nikki writing away there exactly what you're saying, Councillor, but I just asked Nikki if she can confirm that. I don't want to put words in her mouth.
I think Mr. Atkin, bring it close to you.
Yes, I think the only point that I would raise is that the guidance does actually talk about having a lead-in period. Excuse my voice today. And that was raised and referred to earlier. I can't remember which page particularly it's on, but this draft statutory guidance does talk about consideration of the effects of changes in policy and ensuring that there is a lead-in.
Okay, I want to go to Councillor Vernon Jackson and then I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Lyons.
Just my apologies for running out. Sorry, that was the plumber at home and the need for hot water, so my apologies for that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lyons.
And Lyon. Sorry. Well then, just that reference then, look at page 61, please, members, and page 35 of the consultation version, and the very last sentence, where it says, where an applicant has a conviction for using a handheld mobile telephone or a handheld device whilst driving, a licence will not be granted until at least 5 years have elapsed since the conviction or completion of any sentence or driving ban imposed, whichever is the later. Well, that actually, I think that there are some people who have been given points who are licensed drivers in the city, this seems to me that it's something that is not just going to happen, but it's actually going to be pretty strongly recommended that we put in. It will be retrospective. I cannot see how it cannot be. And therefore the question that goes back and pertains to number 5 is not whether or not a vehicle is 8 or 10 years old, which doesn't really, I mean, yes, it does matter, but it isn't actually germane to this. It's whether or not, on the basis that a statutory guideline as to what we do in the case that someone has been convicted of using a handheld mobile telephone, do we just say no? Do we say, oh, well, that's all dispensed? How do we treat that? And that is where, I think that is where this draft statutory guidance, that's the core of it. It's not an offence that is sort of, or an issue that is a matter of policy. This is actually important to the point that we need to know what we do in the event that the government imposes this as a guideline. What happens? It will be retrospective, and how do we impose it?
Right, does anybody want to come back on that one? No? No?
Members, it's ultimately it's for this committee to decide that what response you want to give to these individual questions, and I would imagine that that's a question you might want to vote on, or, you know, a consensus of opinion.
Do you want to put it to the committee, or? I don't mind. It's just...
My proposal is that we don't dismiss out of hand the retrospective element. We do understand that it is where it applies to minor details of policy. That's one thing, but where it refers to legal issues and previous convictions, we will aim to enforce it.
I just wonder, would it be helpful just to have a basic thing throughout to say that we don't think there should be any regulations that are retrospective, full stop, because that covers them all.
Well, exactly.
You're happy with that?
In the event that someone was found guilty of using a mobile telephone,
yeah,
and let's say it's happened in the transition period of just now or a year ago, what they're saying is that our statutory guidance should be that they will not be granted a licence until at least 5 years have elapsed since the conviction. They might now be driving around with one.
Okay.
That's my problem. The question I'm asking is how, as a council, we would look at the change in the law, which is going to be in effect, how it works.
Yeah.
So I don't think we can just say we're not going to be retrospective.
Councillor Sanders.
Can I suggest a way out of this? We've got 2 stages, and I think Ian has highlighted the implementation stage incredibly well, because we've got to sort this out once it comes back. We're at the stage of putting forward a consultation response, and can I suggest that we include both the comments of Councillor Madden and Councillor Pitt in the response to number 5, and then it may not be for minuting, and then encourage Nikki to work out how on earth to implement this subject to the guidance, assuming it all comes back unchanged. Because then that way that gives us time to work stuff out, which is Ian's point, whilst actually putting forward something that reflects, I think, where we are in the consultation response. So I formally would propose that.
Okay, does anybody want to second what Councillor Sanders said, or do you want me to bring you in, Councillor Pitt? I'll bring you in, Councillor Pitt.
Thanks, Chair. Nikki, in relation to the specific instance that Councillor Lyons raised around the mobile phone ban, etc., how would our policy deal with that issue if we do not make it retrospective?
Members, when you introduced your policy and the relevance of convictions in 2016, we did not apply that policy retrospectively. So we did not go back through drivers that were already licensed, because they'd already been deemed fit and proper by the licensing authority to hold a license at that time. What we did is we applied the policy from the date that the licensing committee determined that was that way forward, and that's the approach we've always taken.
Okay, Councillor Leo Madden, you had your hand.
Just to say, in our own statement of policy from April 16, we have no mention of this as an offence. So we talk about all the convictions under 47X and 76X, Nikki, but I can't say anything about a conviction for the use of a mobile phone while driving or whatever. That's page 157, Nikki, and that's it. But again, we could wait to having made our points to this comes back from government anyway.
We may be delving too far into the minutiae. I think a valid point has been raised about how the policy should address this going forward, and that can be formulated into a question and put in the consultation response to government.
If it helps, Councillor Madden, on page 158, under motoring offences, there is reference there to failure to control a motor vehicle by using a mobile phone, and that comes under your, as it's a penalty point offence. If there are more than 8 current penalty points on a driving licence, they would come before the committee, where you would have discretion to decide what action you take. But that your policy does not say a 5-year ban for a mobile phone.
Okay.
The normal operation of policy is that it will apply to considerations going forward in the future, and not act retrospectively. But I think it's an important point to have been raised, and it can be put forward as a question in the consultation response. And I think that's probably about as much as we can discuss on the point at this stage.
Is everybody reasonably happy for that page? 60. What page? 66. Yep. Okay. So, if everyone's happy to go page 66, can I go to Councillor Sanders and to you, Councillor Sanders?
I wanted to go for number 7.7, which talks about recommending all licence holders should be required to subscribe to the DBS update service. The council's response says the applicant and the licence holder has to cough up 13 quid a year. Now that may not be a lot for people, but it's an amount of money that doesn't need to be paid now. May I suggest, Chair, that in the consultation response we encourage the government to give all relevant licensing authorities a 1-year pot of money as a transition to enable the applicants, the licence holders, the users that Ian was talking about at the start of this, to give them some comfort that it is only 13 quid, but it's 13 quid, to be able to facilitate that in the first 12 months.
Sounds sensible. Nikki, okay with that one? Yep.
Yes, members, I can add that they should give consideration to funding that on the initial year.
Councillor Lyon?
Point 8. I slight issue with this because until recently we had annual licence renewals, and so all of a sudden it's become incredibly resource heavy to have. I mean, why can't we have an annual DBS check to undertake, which would have happened if we'd had renewal licence? And at the moment, by being 3 and 5 years, it seems to me that we save the bureaucracy we used to have in issuing new licences every year, but it's not too much to ask that everyone is checked, maybe not every 6 months, but certainly every year, rather than undertaken every 3 years. Because I think that in the event that we did have a safeguarding issue, and there was a DBS issue, and somebody came up and said, well, there was a conviction 2 years ago about which none of us knew anything, but it was on the DBS system, and we hadn't actually checked, then I think the council would be in some kind of stuck in the event that we hadn't.
I just follow that up. I mean,
Councillor Leo, madam.
I think 6 months is prescriptive, and I think Ian's saying that as well. But could Nikki say, whoever's drafted this reply, why we think 3 years is okay? I mean, I presume we haven't come up with any particular problems in relation to danger to the users, but the recommendation here is that we shouldn't agree to any change, or suggest any change.
What do you think on those couple of points from a couple of councillors?
In terms of how we currently do DBS checks, they are done currently under the guidance set down by the DBS itself, which say that these checks should be done once every 3 years. So we're following the DBS guidance at this time in the absence of any other statutory guidance. Once those checks go within the DBS and that route of checking, that does include checking on the barred lists as well, which is a safeguarding issue. The protections afforded once those checks have been done are that the occupation of a Hackney carriage or private hire driver is deemed to be what used to be called a notifiable occupation. So if there were convictions arising, then if they were relevant to the occupation that the drivers were undertaking, the police have a duty, a common law duty of disclosure of information to us. So it's not that we have no picture of this person in that 3 years, because ultimately a DBS check is just a snapshot in time that on that date that person has this or he doesn't have that. Next month it could be different, but that's where the backup system of the common law disclosure will keep licensing authorities advised of any convictions. In terms of the suggested response for you members, it's not suggesting that we don't support it. We are looking to create efficiencies at every opportunity for the service, and I am aware that the Portsmouth City Council have just subscribed to an e-bulk mechanism of doing online checks through the DBS, so that could also be considered. It's just a comment that we don't do that in comparison to our policy at the moment, but if members did wish that, then that could be easily form part of your policy if you wanted it to do so.
Thank you, Nikki. I think it was well explained. So shall we move on then, if everybody's happy, up to page 67? Councillor Lyon?
Very briefly, and it will be brief, number 9 is such a good wording of something that in our policy I've continually come up against in licensed subcommittees as a problem, that I think we should adopt it and put it in straight away into our policy and replace whatever we have at the moment, which is incredibly bad, what I think is incredibly badly and woolly worded. So I'm absolutely in favour of that, and I think we should use that exact wording, and then people won't be able to argue that the sentence was wrongly structured and they couldn't understand it.
Does any member want to say something before I pass over to Nikki on that one? No? Okay, Nikki, just quick one on Councillor Lyon, what he's just said.
I mean, obviously, when this consultation this draft consultation becomes final, then obviously we would recommend that we comply with that. The only difference is obviously that we're saying that we want to know within 24 hours if there's been any arrest, detention or charges being preferred, and the guidance is saying 48. Our policy says, it's in chapter 14, sorry, I haven't got the page on it, but chapter 14, conditions of licence and bylaws. Which starts on page 214. And I think it would be, if you look at page 218, I'll use the example of the operator. The operator shall notify the council within 24 hours of any arrest, detention or charges being preferred against them, or the imposition of any conviction, caution, reprimand or warning. The proposed wording for the guidance is saying that drivers and operators should be required to notify the licensing authority within 48 hours upon arrest and release, charge or conviction of any motoring offence or any other blah 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 blah. The wording, I mean, I'm just trying to see what the difference is between the wording, because it says within 24. But I'm happy if it needs changing. We can do that.
Hold on, members. Can we just let people finish before? Hands up, councillor, please, and then I can then come to you by all means. But let people finish off. So if you finish, Nikki, right, councillor Lyon, please.
Let me explain. The words "of any" is a problem, but within 24 hours upon is perfectly fine, and that's what they use. But within 24 hours, that shall notify the council within 24 hours of any arrest. It doesn't actually. It is too unspecific in terms of what those words actually mean. And when we had to deal with it in a particular licensed subcommittee case, we were unable to find the individual at fault for interpreting that particular rule in a way that was quite odd. And it's not just that, it's specifically in the thing about points in our licence. in our policy about. So it also says if they haven't told the council of, unless you've changed it since, because it's if they haven't told the council about points being given or any, or impending or anything like that. And there's actually a specific phrase, I don't know where it is, because, as you know, there are 490 pages we've had to go through, and I couldn't find it specifically.
Should we ask Nikki?
In order to assist members, if you would like, there is certain delegation that officers have been given in accordance with wording of the policy. If members are happy to give that authority to me today to change the wording to clarify it better outside of this consultation document, then I am happy to make those changes immediate to add clarification as Councillor Allen wants.
Sorry, Nick, I think that would be helpful if members are happy with what the officers just said. Everybody happy with that? Councillor Steve Pitt.
Just to link into the comments that Councillor Lyon made just now, I remember the specific instance he's referring to, and we do have to remember that not every driver interpreting our regulations has English as their first language, and I think the presentation of the instruction is the key point here, so that instead of just stringing all that together in a sentence, it should be notify the issuing authority within 48 hours, colon, and then bullet points underneath separating each of those things out so that they can keep reading the first sentence, refer it down to a bullet point. When trying to demonstrate points of licensing law in the past, have had to do that in order to make it make sense to myself. I think it's perfectly reasonable that it should be that straightforward for a member of the public or indeed any of our drivers. So if we could just restructure with the bullet points, I think it would be totally unambiguous and would avoid all the upons and if any's and of and also's and everything else that we use to make it all fit together as a sentence.
Members, I'm happy to do that next week for you.
There we are, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to the next page, which is page 68. Anybody, members want to add? Councillor Sanders, please.
Just to say to Nikki that with regards to point 13, which is around licensing authorities using tools such as the National Register of Taxes and information sharing and stuff like that, one of the things it might be useful, because I suspect this is going to happen, is for Nikki and the team actually to start coming up with plans to implement it, because that may take a little while, and it's useful we start the work now, rather than wait until the government guidance. There's no harm in contingency planning and emergency planning, but I think this isn't going to be an emergency, this is going to happen, so it might be useful to start now.
To clarify, we are all ready to go. We've got the appropriate guidance, and certainly we will bring that on board as soon as we can.
Okay, Councillor Pitt, please.
And just to add to that, Nikki, could we also add to that feedback to the government under 12.12, the same applies with the bullet pointing, that they make these things completely transparent and don't try and construct long sentences needlessly.
Okay. Did you get that, Nikki? Okay. All right, so members, if everyone's happy, we'll move on to page 69. Anybody want to add anything? No? Okay. So 69's finished. 70. It's like bingo here, isn't it? Yeah.
Fewer prizes.
Page 70, members. Anybody want to make any comments on page 70? Councillor Sanders, please.
The points on page 70, but it goes on to the first line of page 71. It's just around trying to ensure that we can enforce licensees outside our statutory area, which sounds great. No problem with supporting the recommendation, but in our case we might need to think about how wide we take this, because there's some stuff around county lines which is related to this as well, whether we want to include Havant, Fareham, Eastleigh, the Island, the Isle of Wight and so on. So there's an issue about how wide we want to do the information sharing once this is brought in. But the recommendation is eminently sensible, because it also talks elsewhere about metro mayors and all that sort of stuff. We ain't got those, but it'd be useful to work out who we would want to share the information with based on the demand that exists of where the drivers come into our city. I'm particularly concerned about the county lines aspect of it.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So we'll go on to page 71 then. No, Councillor just touched it. Councillor Lyon, please.
I was touching on this at the beginning, which is point 21. I still labour the point that I think that we should look at every policy and see the fairness to each of the constituent parts of it, whether it's the passenger, the driver, or the operator, and actually also the council itself, which has a part to play. And I have had a sense of wonderment for the last 4 years that the operator part of this equation gets off more likely than anybody else. And it seems to me that, that it is eminently sensible that if PHV operators are keeping records of who's going where and all the rest of it, and that's in our policy, and what date and what time they were picked up and where from and who picked them up and what car was used, it doesn't seem that much of a problem to see that the operators themselves are registered, that their staff are registered as well for the bookings. Again, I go back to an issue where we had in front of us a licensing subcommittee, a telephone conversation in transcript that had been sent to an operator. We didn't actually know at the time, and it later discovered that we disagreed as to whether the operator had been a male or a female, because in fact in the transcript, of course, you don't hear the voice, you just see the words written. But it was quite clear that the operator's employees were not given any kind of training, it seemed to me, in the event of a complaint, or if they had been, they certainly didn't exercise it during the contents of that transcript. It also transpired in this conversation, which was sent to, collected. In fact, we had to go and collect the conversation from this operator, even though they run cars and run things to us. I don't see why they couldn't have said, because it actually asked that we should provide it. So the operators, I think, are having a good time of this. But elementally, the point is that it was saying that there had been a number of complaints, and we were told in that meeting that this operator gets hundreds of complaints. But the policy says they have to report all complaints within 24 hours of receiving them. All complaints. It doesn't say that it's up to them to decide whether the complaints are important or not. If we have it as a policy, it is not for the operator just to decide whether or not, in fact, they think it's important enough. It's for us. If that's what we're asking them to do, they must produce the complaints to us. And the point I'm making is we have been operator light and driver heavy in our policy towards the taxi drivers and private hire vehicle drivers in Portsmouth, and we should lighten up on one and be slightly heavier on the other. And that means that we don't just say, oh no, we don't think it's going to be convenient for them, so we shouldn't be asking them to register their staff. We shouldn't do that. We should impose upon them obligations of a similar nature that we're imposing upon drivers.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I do have two other councillors wanting to say a few words as well. So, Nikki, do you want to answer that one first of all? Or general?
I mean, as a general indication for you of the situation in Portsmouth, as far as I can provide you with that background information, we haven't come across any instances where there have been concerns raised or offences committed by staff in the centres taking the calls, using that information to commit offences. It seems a minimal risk compared to what the government are suggesting that we should do. The concerns raised are in terms of if we are being asked to look at the policy of employing ex-offenders that will take bookings or dispatch vehicles. What role is the licensing authority in that to monitor employment of staff at businesses where, if they ultimately have problems, you have the ultimate sanction that you will take that operator's licence away from that business. It just seems very top heavy for the council or the licensing authority to become involved in supervising or overseeing the employment of staff within the private hire operator's business. But again, that's just based on my experience. Members may have a different view, and obviously this is your response.
Thank you very much. I do have three other councillors who wishes to say some words. So, Councillor Scott Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, Nikki, I've been out with your team quite extensively in the last probably 6 months. So I've been going with the guys on their visits with the taxi trade and in licensing premises. what I will say is under 19, this comes down to resources with other authorities because, well, we are heavily resourced here. Other authorities such as Havant Fareham and such aren't, so they can't actually give us the information that we need as quickly as possible. So that while we do this, for example, the authority with, like, obviously the drug taking with Southampton, we're probably quicker on the uptake than the other authorities. So I think it's mindful that what's being asked of us is that we're doing anyway, but also at the same time we're actually considerably more resourced than the authorities around us.
Thank you, Councillor. Did you want to add a couple of words to that, Nicky, or that statement? No? Okay. Councillor Pitt, please.
I think this is really simple. It says point 21 is intrinsically linked to point 20. What is the point in having DBS check the requirement and supporting the recommendation that you will DBS check PHV operators if you're not going to keep any record of who the operators are? That just seems a complete nonsense to me, so I think we should do what Ian said and support recommendation 21.
Councillor Sanders, please.
Can I therefore propose... Ian, I told you. Can I propose on that basis that we delete every single sentence after the first sentence in this response, and in in 21, which then becomes 22 and 23 as well, that we retain only the first sentence, and in the sentence that is retained, we delete the word not.
Sounds good to me. What about the officers? What do you reckon? Yeah.
Does, based upon the justification given,
Yeah.
support the recommendation.
Have you got that?
And then we take out, it is our view.
Just 1 second.
No, before it is our view that this goes beyond the fit and proper requirements of the licence.
Hold on a second.
Everything
Just 1
after the
second.
first sentence.
So the first sentence,
That's the
without
proposal.
word not. I was saying the first sentence without
Yeah.
Can I just confirm, members, that that alteration is, rather than that you don't support the recommendation by the government in terms of checking on operator staff, that you do support, that there is justification to support their proposals? Okay.
Hooray. Excellent. Okay, so is that page 71? Everyone happy with that? 72? Just go through it while I'm here. Not really cool. 73? 74? 73, sorry, Councillor Sanders.
Yes, it relates to point 26 and CCTVs. It seems pretty clear to me that we need to make sure that every CCTV that we have has audio in it. A frustration I've had on a previous licensing panel is that we were able to lip read the conversation, but we were not able to actually listen to any of it, which, given what was going on, would have been very helpful. Thank you, Ian, for saving me from your lawyers. It would be very, very useful to have it as part of to have the government state that audio has to be included as part of the CCTV package. Otherwise, it becomes a more balanced judgment than it otherwise would be. But I'm always happy to be overruled.
Nicky, did you want to just...
No,
okay.
Mr.
Mr. Attron's case, and then we go over to Councillor Udy.
Well, nothing, of course, prevents you making that consultation response and saying that's the view of the authority. But I would stress that there is only one case on surveillance and CCTV, that of Southampton City Council. And unfortunately, the Information Rights Tribunal held that continuous audio recording, generally speaking, unless in very certain circumstances, is not to be permitted. And as a result, Southampton City Council amended their policy to endorse a triggered approach. So I just make that as a point of information. So effectively, what their policy now does is protects the driver, but not the passenger. So to say, the driver can trigger it when they feel it necessary, but there's no trigger for passengers, unfortunately. That's the upshot of that particular ruling.
I've got Councillor Udy, and then I can come back to you, Councillor.
Whilst I kind of agree, because we were in that licensing matter together, and we really had to see what that driver said at the time, and we couldn't, but we were like, we could employ a lip reader, like a professional communications person. I don't know if they have a professional title, like a professional lip reader maybe, I don't know. The fact is that I'm uncomfortable with the recording. Like I said, there's no basis for it to be continuous. That's been put in a court of law, do you say tribunal? So it's been called a court of law. Even if it's triggered, it gets to the point where if this is a licensing matter in taxis and we start recording people's conversations, then will that edge over into the licensing trade, and then we have to start having CCTV recording every bit of audio in pubs, and then our whole lives on tape? It's bad enough that we're under constant surveillance as it is, and then I'd feel like if we started recording, like, I wouldn't want to talk in a taxi if I knew I had audio recorded of me all the time, and I feel like many drivers might agree with me on that, because like, especially if I was a little bit inebriated, taxi drivers hear my entire life.
I'm sure that never happens.
It's like a lot of people, but I just don't feel like it's kind of a privacy issue for me. Do you know what I mean? Thanks.
That's a good point, Councillor, I must say. Councillor Pitt.
I'm not going to go on. I'm just going to say I agree with everything Councillor Udy just said.
Councillor Sanders.
Having read a report that we're going to deal with later on, which is the Task and Finish Group, and I fully understand all the privacy concerns that are interesting in there. This is the recommendation 17 of the government's Task and Finish Group, which is on page 369 of our agenda, says that in the interests of passenger safety, particularly in the lights of events in towns and cities like Rochdale, Oxford, Newcastle and Rotherham, all licensed vehicles must be fitted with CCTV brackets, visual and audio, subject to strict data protection measures. So we already have got that there, and I understand why. I fully understand, as a fully paid up civil libertarian, I'm more than happy to have privacy deal with everything, but here as an authority we have to have a balance in what is a workplace, which is recognised within government guidance and also within health and safety legislation. So given that we have that recommendation from that panel, which is in there somewhere, I think we may need to look at issues around audio, but whether it is a consultation response, I have no idea about, and the majority of the committee.
Councillor Scott Harris, you had your hand.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, Chair, but Councillor Udy, you are spot on with your response, because this come up before a committee when the policy originally went through with audio. Me and Councillor Fielding just had a brief conversation that obviously people could have a conversation, be used against them in blackmail, or I know certainly when I have a drink I certainly say things that frustrate me or not, and I probably wouldn't say normally, so I don't think the guys here want it either, so I think audio is completely off the table for me.
Okay, thank you very much. So I know Bruce, but you're happy with, I'm not going to, yeah, happy with that, that's fine, that's good. I was going to, that's great. Okay then, so we'll just go back to page 73, is everyone happy with that then? Yeah, okay then. 74, 75, that's it.
Just before we
What Councillor Line, please?
Just before we finish dispose of this, it's worth going back just to page. It's worth going back to page 47 and 51 to point 2.66 and 2.83, which form the basis of one of the recommendations, but don't actually, as far as I recall, appear specifically in their consultation, where it seems almost obvious, and I'm not sure it happens, but it says that licensing authorities should provide guidance for passengers. This is 2.66 on page 47. For passengers on making complaints directly to the licensing authority that must be available on their website and displayed in licensed vehicles. I think that's right. I think we should be implementing that as soon as possible, that we absolutely insist that all vehicles have a means by which the public can complain directly to the licensing team and not necessarily just to the operator. And at 2.83, The department suggests that there should be a clear, simple and well-publicised process for the public to make complaints about drivers and operators. This will provide a further source of intelligence when considering the renewal of licences and of any additional training that may be required. Seems to me that's obvious too. And what I would ask is, as well as this consultation, that we request that the licensing team implement as much as they can of these 2 points as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Nikki, yes.
Perhaps to reassure then, Councillor Lyon, that where we talk at 266 about information that must be displayed on our website and licensed vehicles, we do actually have a website where we have our contact details that complainants can. We also have on the inside of the vehicle, as you get in the vehicle, on each dashboard of every licensed vehicle there is a sticker that gives the council's phone number and the council's email address if people want to make a complaint. This is also replicated in the Hackney carriage vehicles on the table of fares, which they have to display in a prominent position, that the how to complain, how to contact the council already exists, and those details are already provided. We are working in terms of further information on our website. We've been working in conjunction with the media team to improve the customer experience on the council's website overall, and certainly I'm looking at making improvements into that journey that members of the public may make to find that information.
Another suggestion through the chair, please, which is that actually we instruct the operators that when they're using a website or an app, that they actually have to put the council's number for complaints on it in on their app as well. That in fact, through that process, that they have to publicise how people could complain in the event that something went wrong.
Not going down well in the audience, Councillor, there, but Nikki?
It could be a matter of policy that if members wish to pursue that, we could pursue that as by way of a condition separate report if there are other issues coming up out of today.
Okay. Anybody else for that one? Councillor Pitt?
I think there needs to be some careful thought given to how that's done, if that is the decision of the committee. What you'd normally have in that kind of situation is a line that says, do you wish to make a complaint, that clicks through to something else. I don't think when somebody's marketing their product, asking them to prominently advertise how to complain about their product on the landing page of their website is an appropriate measure in giving public confidence in the service that they're likely to receive.
Okay.
So putting a hyperlink saying, do you wish to complain, is appropriate if that then takes them to that information.
I just want to be careful because we don't go into debate too much, because that's what I've just been advised. So, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
So I have my Aqua app open, and it takes me to the home page where I want to book. But actually, on the menu section, you could easily add something in the menu section, which is not on the front page, so you need to go and find it. But as Steve has suggested, that really is a simple way of doing it, and I'm sure everybody else's apps can do the same. Other apps, of course, are available.
Okay. Did you want? Are you okay? No. Okay. I know Bruce had his hand up. The trouble is, Bruce, I've asked you to speak about everybody, so I'm just trying to avoid you in the nicest way. Okay then. Can I ask for 5 minutes recess because, sorry, I've got to use the toilet. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. So this item's finished. If you could just give us 5 minutes just for a quick comfort break.
don't waste these. Rum and black? No, it's black currant water. But Guy uses them on the allotment of stock and coconut wine.
I just warn you, Councillor, you are being filmed, so just, yes. Right then, thank you very much. We've had a lot of thought and we're going to move on to number 6. Item number 6, if members are happy for that. And,
I've waited an hour and a half.
one, sorry, but it's my meeting, Councillor, I'm afraid, so I'm making the decision. So item 6 is what we're going to do now. How we're going to do this is the officer's going to introduce the report, members are going to ask questions, trade can ask questions because I thought that is only fair. And then deputations. So deputations today we've got is Viv Young for item 6, Bruce Hall, Andrew Rogers and Chris Dixon written in, and has everybody received that first of all? Can I confirm that, members? Yes? Okay, so I'm going to hand over to number 6 then to Nikki first of all, please.
Chair, can we just invite the deputies to the table first?
We can do if you want to come up first of all. That is Viv Young and Bruce Hall. If you want to come and sit up first of all. Thank you. So, Nikki, could you introduce item 6 for us?
Thank you, Chair. Again, you've got a twofold report for consideration for this afternoon in relation to amendments to your current statement of licensing policy. The approach that you are being asked to consider is A, that the current policy be amended as set out in paragraph 2.1 of the report, and that's in so far as it relates to the age limits of vehicles. And then secondly, for members to instruct officers to prepare future reports, if they consider it necessary to do so, on any other aspect of the policy which the committee would seek to be reviewed. Members of this committee will recall that you have had various discussions with the taxi trade and private hire trade at the consultative group meetings, and that you have given tacit approval to extend the entry age requirement for vehicles from what it is now, which is 3 years, to extend it to 4 years. That was made on the proviso that the empirical evidence from the council's vehicle inspector supported this proposal. Simon Potter, the General Manager of Adams Morey, is present today to answer any questions you may have arising from this change of policy and to assist with any other questions you may have. Members, Appendix B, which is 273 of your papers, does provide you with a summary of vehicle testing over the past 5 years. And you can see a decrease in the number of test failures for younger vehicles, which is particularly more evident since the age policies which restrictions were introduced in 2016. Members, you'll also be fully aware of both your own policy towards licensing a fleet of younger, cleaner and greener vehicles. And also you are aware of the current ministerial directive to produce an air quality plan to achieve compliance citywide with legal limits for nitrogen dioxide. Whilst I understand the trade have campaigned for extending the age limit for petrol diesel cars beyond the current maximum 8 years, it is the view of your professional officers, in consultation as well with the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation, that to encourage this policy by extending age limits for those types of vehicles would not be consistent with the Council's aim and legal duty to make improvements to air quality in the city. However, there is opportunity for alternative arrangements to be put forward by way of a separate report to encourage and incentivise the use of electric vehicles, which could explore increases in age limits if those vehicles were to be licensed. So the second part of the report, members, as I outlined to you, is for you to address any other areas of the current policy. The report would suggest that you consider what policy considerations you would wish to be amended and in what respect, so that you can instruct officers to bring future reports to the committee along with any guidance, evidence and necessary consultation prior to adoption of any new policy. I'll keep it brief, members, and I'm obviously happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Nikki. So, members, could we down for any questions? Councillor Leo Madden.
Yeah, could I thank you for the introduction there, Nikki, and clearly in view just Tuesday of this week when we had a council meeting where there was a massive debate on climate change and what we are going to do in Portsmouth as a city is collectively and as individually to reduce that. So you've mentioned about our actual policy is a drive towards younger and cleaner vehicles. I'm not clear though, so the Assistant Director of Transport was going to advise, which he or she has done, and 310 and 311 tell us what they say. Are they saying that if we are to increase vehicles from 10 to the age of a vehicle from 8 to 10 years, that they would support that, but only if the vehicle is an electric or hybrid, i.e. they wouldn't go for diesel or petrol vehicles, and are recommending to us not to accept that. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
That's right, Councillor.
Councillor Lyon, please.
So very briefly on this point, which is the overall vehicle test results. We know that in the last 5 to 6 years, performance of vehicles has improved considerably, and their emissions, apart from perhaps various German manufacturers, have actually meant that they are more roadworthy for longer. And clearly the point that we should be taking on board is that if you look at the 3 to 6 years in the overall vehicle test results, it goes from, in 2014, 57% failure rate to a static or stable 2017 and 18 to 29% failure rate in the 3 to 6 year band, and it seems to reflect the fact that vehicles are better made, or they are more appropriate for town use than they might have been in the past. And it strikes me that actually, as we move forwards, 8 to 10 years will be sensible because they will be of that genre. There's a big difference, I think, round about 2008 and 9. The quality of vehicles on our roads is substantially different, and round about that time, might be slightly earlier, might be slightly later. And we're now in 2019, so that vehicles that are 9 years old now are probably better than vehicles that were 5 or 6 years old 10 years ago, in terms of their roadworthiness and what they are doing on the ground. And I think we should take that into account as a committee in deciding and determining how we want to proceed with that.
Thank you very much. I do have Councillor Sanders to come in a minute. Nikki, did you want to just...
No, members, if there are any questions specifically about vehicle suitability, again, Mr Potter will be probably the best person to address those too.
Ms Councillor Sanders and then Councillor Vernon Jackson.
2 points, both of which are related to what Leo has highlighted. The first is that obviously, given the decision of the Council to put the city into a climate emergency with the focus on carbon dioxide emissions, then it might be helpful, Nikki, to work through how we now have a pledge to get to net zero carbon emissions by 2030, which we all want to get to, but it might be useful to work up how that could affect the taxi trade. Clearly, if we're going to get there, we can't do it by constantly bashing everybody over the head with sticks, and there need to be some incentives, I would suggest, in order to encourage our Hackney and private hire vehicle colleagues to move towards lower emission vehicles and greener vehicles. I don't think you do that by taxing people. I think you do that by incentivising people to do that, with the stick coming right at the end. So I would suggest that we look at our policy to see if we can try and help encourage, as Gerald is doing in lobbying government, to try and encourage the taxi trades to develop greener vehicles, electric vehicles, low emission vehicles, without actually actually hitting everybody over the head with it, which is always the danger when you're trying to encourage a safer and more sustainable planet. So those are my sort of two related points. It's not purely about age, I think. It's also about the quality of the vehicle as well. And there may be ways we can do that that have to be consistent with what we're telling DEFRA and DFT on air quality, and also entirely in line with the unanimous decision of the Council on Tuesday about carbon dioxide emissions.
Thank you, Councillor. Nikki, did you want to just quick...
Only members, certainly if that is a proposal from Councillor Saunders and the committee to come back with a report in terms of incentivising electric, hybrid, that sort of vehicles and how that potentially could look, we can certainly bring that back to a licensing committee at a future date.
Yep, everyone happy with that, what Nikki's saying? I'm going to go to Gerald Vernon Jackson and Councillor Pitt.
Can I ask, when a vehicle fails, what then happens?
If a vehicle fails its test, then the vehicle will be suspended by the inspectors at the Adams Morey garage, and then that vehicle will remain suspended until such time as any defects have been put right and have been passed by the vehicle inspectors.
So they do a test, they sort it, and they pass.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay. Thank you. The thing that is, for me, it says out of that is that if a vehicle has passed its test, why take it off the road? In terms of climate change, my understanding, and I might be wrong, but my understanding is that 50% of the carbon footprint is the construction of the car through 50% of the carbon footprint of the car through its life is in the construction phase, and the other 50% is in its lifetime on the roads. Therefore, actually junking things early is actually doing the exact opposite of what we're trying to do, because we're forcing more and more cars to be built with a higher and higher carbon footprint. So actually reusing things that can be used, if they can pass the test, is a logical way of making sure that we address climate change as well.
I'm going to let Simon add to this, but certainly to say that the reason why we reduced the policy and reduced it to 8 years is that it's not, cars are deteriorating. Over the years, the longer they stay on, cars do not pass first time. There are a number of defects. The car begins to look tired. Its overall bodywork starts to change. I think, and Simon can probably explain it far better than me, but the decision to restrict age limits in 2016 was based on the evidence that you considered from the garage as to the overall standard of vehicles that were presented for inspection and subsequent failure at the garage. Perhaps Simon
I think if we can let Councillor just quickly say what you said, and then we're going to go over to Simon, if that's at all possible. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Well, I'd be very interested to know from Simon, but I can absolutely see if a vehicle fails and continues to fail, then it's off. But if a vehicle fails and passes, why the artificial thing of saying it then can't drive on the road? As I said at the last meeting, if somebody's coming to pick me up in a vintage Rolls Royce that's been able to pass your test, I'm happy. But Nikki, you won't. Well, the licensing department won't be, and wouldn't allow the vintage Rolls Royce to come and pick me up, even if it passed every test under the sun, which seems bizarre.
That's not the policy of the licensing authority. We have a policy we have a policy that if a vehicle presented itself in such exceptional condition, like the Rolls-Royce that is coming to pick you up, then the council would consider that on a case-by-case basis, and that there would be opportunities for that vehicle to be given an extension on its life, but that would be looking at it on a case-by-case basis.
Can I ask Simon to say a few words, members, if you're happy with it? Then I'm going to go over to Councillor Pitt. Simon, can you say a few words onto that?
You use the example, obviously, of the vintage Rolls-Royce. But that sort of vehicle would be tested under different conditions. It doesn't have to meet today's legislation. There are obviously emission standards that have to be met by modern vehicles that vintage vehicle wouldn't have to meet, braking standards that it wouldn't have to meet as well. That's why the Council developed a policy of age limits, taking into mind emissions levels, Euro 4, Euro 5 and Euro 6 legislation, which has gradually come on board. Diesel vehicles are a lot cleaner than they used to be. But if you continue just using the basis of it passing a test or failing a test and having rectification work and carry on using it, where do you stop? What age of vehicle do you stop at?
Councillor Vernon Jackson, do you want to answer that?
Well, my hope would be that if we have tests that are stringent, that a car that passes a stringent series of tests is okay, and a car that doesn't pass it is not okay and therefore can't be used. But if an older car is able to pass the stringent tests, why have an artificial limit that says just because it's of a certain age it can't be used? It seems to me very strange. I absolutely think you need to have decent testing, absolutely. But if a car can get through the testing that's available for the cars that are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, but it's 9, 10, 11 years old, and it passes the tests, what is the problem?
Okay. Okay.
I need to know. Is Councillor Vernon Jackson changing the recommendation B1 then? Is he going to change that to say that considering the term application of particular exceptional hackney carriage or private over the age of 8?
Yes, I was going to put forward an amendment, but I think this is. I don't think this is the time yet. But when it does come forward, I will be putting forward an amendment. I don't know if it'll pass or not.
Okay. Thank you very much. I did have Councillor Pitt, and then I'm going to have Councillor Scott Harris, please. Councillor Pitt.
Okay. There's a couple of questions I've got. I'm not sure whether Nicky or Simon would be best to answer them. Noting Chris Dixon's deputation, bearing in mind that we are dealing with people's livelihoods here, and that they don't actually know until they get the car to the garage whether or not it's going to pass, why is it that we then don't allow even a couple of days for people to get rectifications made? We just take it off the road, don't we? Why do we do that?
Simon.
It's treated in exactly the same way as an MOT test would be treated, in the respect of if your private car fails an MOT, it should not be used on the road, which is why it's used. We use the same criteria in that respect. The user has 10 working days to get rectification done and brought back for retest. If it's outside those 10 working days, a full test is carried out.
No, I understand the policy, but what I'm asking is why?
Because the compliance test has to be at least the minimum standard of the MOT test.
Okay.
But it's no. Can I just fish on this? Because just want some clarity. I understand that the compliance has to be at least the standard of the MOT, but that's not what it is it? It actually is a higher standard in some areas than the MOT. Is that correct?
That is correct, but the point you're making is that they should still be able to use the vehicle. And if you take the criteria of the MOT test, if you fail an MOT test, the vehicle cannot be used on the public road.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, but this is not the same thing. What I'm saying is, if they go in to be tested, and all the bits of the test that are the same as the MOT are met, because no vehicle should be on the road if it can't pass an MOT, that's one thing. Saying that we're choosing to apply the same standards for everything else, in other words, if you don't pass these additional tests that we have chosen to put on, your car is off the road when it is capable of passing an MOT without even allowing somebody, say, 72 hours to rectify it. What is the areas of harm to anybody of it being on the road for a couple of days when it couldn't be otherwise? Because you're depriving somebody of their income, you want them to get the vehicle fixed and get it sorted because that's in everyone's best interest, and we seem to be Fine, that's Chris Dixon's point, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I'm just trying to find out what the rationale is.
Members, perhaps I can give you some more practical examples, and I'm sure Simon can help me because he actually sees some of the vehicles. For example, I'm assuming if you presented your private car for an MOT and it had a number of dents all over it, you wouldn't fail an MOT because the car had a number of dents over it. But would you, as the licensing authority, be happy to see one of your licensed vehicles, emblazoned with, this is a Portsmouth City Council licensed taxi, running around the city or in anywhere else with substantial accident damage on it? Also, it's not so much it's also the comfort of passengers. If a vehicle was presented to the testers and inside the car the upholstery was soiled, hadn't been cleaned, there was deterioration on the car seats itself, is that appropriate for that car to continue working and to take passengers when the vehicle is in such a state of neglect? Is it not more appropriate that you've set a standard in terms of what you expect a licensed vehicle to look like and what a passenger can expect when they get into that vehicle? And if we don't have those standards, then is there a fear that we could reputationally we would have a bad reputation for standards of our vehicles?
Can you one more, and then I'm going to go to
No, honestly, Chair, if Councillor Pitt wants to go on this point, I'm happy for him to do so.
Thank you, Scott. That's all logical, but in reality, could that car have had those dents and been driving around since its previous test because it had them for 11 months ago?
If it did, it would be in breach of its licence conditions because all proprietors are required to report any accident damage to us and are on obligation to get it repaired.
Yes, I understand that, Nikki, but somebody could be walking along the road and kick my door in. That's not accident damage. That's just somebody who's put a boot in my car door.
I use the term generally, but you understand what I mean in terms of physical damage to the vehicle, Councillor.
I do, and it's also possible, therefore, that what we would regard as unacceptable upholstery had been there for weeks, if not months, since the previous test.
I would suggest potentially one customer who soiled the vehicle particularly badly could change that in one evening.
Exactly. But my point is, if we have no day-by-day check, which would be completely impractical, what is the damage to anyone in allowing somebody 48 hours to rectify problems with their vehicle and re-present it for a test without it being taken off the road? That seems to me that what we're saying is it's all right for you to drive around and inappropriately all the time. We don't know about it. We'll do absolutely nothing about it. And the point that we know about it, we're not even going to give you 2 days to rectify it. It just seems a little bit over the top. I'm not saying that they should be given a week or a month or 2 weeks or whatever, but in a reasonable period of time. If we do an environmental health inspection on a premises, unless it's absolutely dire, we usually work with those people and enable them to still run that premises and that business because we recognise that that's a reasonable thing to do. At the point at which... At the point at which they fail to comply with that, we then take enforcement action. What we are doing is taking enforcement action without enabling somebody to comply, and I personally find that slightly over the top. I wouldn't want to see this extended out and out and out, but I think enabling somebody at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, having failed a test, to go straight to a garage the following morning, get those issues rectified at their own cost, and represent that vehicle the following day, but maybe having been able to work that night having rectified those issues, just does not seem unreasonable to me.
The difficulty we have is that you're saying that you've set a standard, and you have to set a standard because you are saying this is the standard we expect of vehicles. If you then say, but we're prepared to not worry about it, where do you... But what I'm trying to say is, at what point does an off is it expect is
After
an
two,
officer,
after 2 or 3 days.
Okay. They're saying
there
after a
are
couple of days.
there are some issues in terms of legal issues that could affect that kind of discretion, because as part of the licence there is a certificate of exemption from getting an MOT. So by doing this test, those vehicles do not need to go and have an MOT every year. Those compliance certificates can only be issued if the vehicle passes the mechanical test. So if we have a failure from the mechanical inspector, but officers override that inspector and say we'll keep it on for 48 hours, those vehicles could potentially be...
No, I'm sorry, Nikki, I totally disagree. I very explicitly said that as long as it passes all the requirements of the mechanical MOT test that a normal car would have to pass, only then could it be given 2 days to pass the additional stringent measures that we put on because it's a hire vehicle. We do it with restaurants, we do it with every other type of business. As far as I'm aware, the only time that we enforce this 100% black and white is with people who drive vehicles to earn a living, and I think in the current climate that seems to me, and other members of the committee might disagree, but that seems to be unreasonable behaviour on the part of the council, because I'm not saying it should be open-ended, I'm saying where you draw the line, and it should be after 48, maybe 72 hours, but no more. The other point I wanted to make, which is connected to that, is around the age of the vehicles. Now, a clean air zone is a possibility for this city, as we know, and we've also had a major debate in full council on Tuesday around a climate emergency event. Now, I've looked at other clean air zones around the country, and I know Councillor Vernon Jackson has too. The age of diesel vehicles that will not be subject to charges under a CAZ are for those registered on or after the 1st of September 2015. So I do not think that it would be remotely wise for us at this time to do anything that could be impacted by that date, should we be required to bring that in here, because then we would be in a retrospectively difficult situation, because we'd have allowed a vehicle to be a certain age, even though the rules imposed on us by the government around a clean air zone could further restrict that. The date for petrol vehicles is different. It's the 1st of January 2006, so even at 10 years, that's not going to matter. But with diesels in particular, we don't want people going out and buying vehicles because they're following our licence policy, and then rules imposed on us subsequently by DEFRA impact on that. So I suggest that the inclusion for vehicles licensed on or that were registered on or after the 1st of September 2015 will need to be in our policy, or otherwise we could end up in a bit of a mess later on.
What I'm going to suggest to members is, if there is a view of committee members that they want officers to go back and look at extension of vehicles beyond 8 years, then we can certainly come back and include on that the issue of any discretion in terms of failure of tests, that officers can come away and come up with a recommendation with a view to reviewing that policy.
So, yeah, okay, I've got...
In accordance with part 2 of the recommendation.
Yeah. So that could be something we could put on the table then.
Yeah.
Can we put that on the table? If members are happy with, in a minute. We'll just go around and we'll just carry on asking the questions, shall we? First of all, yeah, Scott's first, yes. I'm going over to Scott, then I'm going over to you, sir, then Councillor Sanders, and then Councillor Vernon Jackson. Scott, sorry, House.
I'll keep it brief, Chair, because Councillor Pitts echoed quite a lot of what I wanted to say, and that's why I was glad for him to follow on, because I could see where he was going with it. Fundamentally, the travelling public, really, they don't care if they get in a car that's got a bumper that's a bit dented. They don't really care, and you guys know this. They don't care if it comes from Havant, they don't care if it comes from Fareham, they don't care if it comes from Gosport. As long as they get into the cab and it's going from A to B. And our standards are extremely high compared to the other authorities. So we need to work with the trade before the trade dies, because effectively that is what's going to happen. These guys aren't going to have anything to do, and we're going to have basically drivers out of work, so we need to actually help the drivers, fundamentally. And then electric vehicles, Councillor Van Jackson's going to look to put an amendment to policy that I'm probably minded to support, so that's a good thing. But fundamentally it comes down to the testing. I think the testing is too stringent. The problem we've got with the testing is fundamentally, obviously it gives them the MOT exemption, but where do we go to amend that, Nikki? I mean, what can we do? Is there a certain, can we go basically down to a basic MOT?
You have adopted and I'm going to pass to Simon at some point, you have adopted the patent guidance in terms of the suitability of licensed vehicles. If you have good reason that you don't feel that having those standards is no longer necessary, but I think it might be helpful for you to speak or ask Simon to address the issues that drivers are off the road for days and days or 72 hours because they can't get the car retested. I think it would be helpful if Mr. Potter could give you an indication about retesting of vehicles.
So shall I go over to Mr. Potter first of all, if members are happy, and then we'll come back to you. Mr. Potter, please.
Just to go back to the previous point about discretion or dispensation for cosmetic issues, there actually is some discretion given, and we liaise with the licensing authority in the respect of if people sometimes have an ongoing insurance claim that is in the process of being actioned. Those are allowed to pass for minor body damage with an inspection in 2 weeks, 4 weeks by the authority themselves. We also do in certain circumstances, because we do use pattern guidance, but if you look at pattern guidance, it is very strict for certain things. I think one of the things is 3 dents in one panel of over 20 millimetres. So we do use a bit of discretion in the respect of looking at the overall condition of the vehicle and also the visibility of those dents. Are they low? Are they in the sort of your eye line and things like that? So that is taken into account. With the respect of cleanliness of the insides, all you need is one complaint, isn't it? You know, the next person to get into that car after the test, and we've allowed them 72 hours to get it cleaned. My view is that you know it's going for test. Maybe the effort should be made to clean that. It's not a big ask.
If I may, Chair, but with the greatest respect, if one of these drivers here have got a vehicle that's filthy, remember the public generally is not going to get in it. They're going to go, why would I get in the vehicle? So it's in their interest to keep it clean anyway. It's almost a redundant point.
We'll come back to you in a second. I'm going to go over to Councillor Lynd, please.
Yes, thank you. I broadly agree with Councillor Pitt on all the things he was talking about in terms of a test. But, I mean, one of the things, of course, that we don't want to do as a council is create monopolies where we find them. And clearly, if you're the only people in town who can do this test, then you can charge our people whatever you want to because they can't go anywhere else to get the test, which to me is not a very good way of policy in terms of monopolies. I know Nikki wants to answer that because presumably there's a prescribed fee, but that fee is agreed between you and the council and not you and the taxi drivers and have to pay it. So that's the first question. The second is, yes, there needs to be at least, if you're going to have an enhanced test, it seems to me that the first thing, it has to pass an MOT. Yep, I think that's absolutely right. But when I go for an MOT, and sometimes it has been known I've failed the test, the immediate thing is that they rectify things on the spot there, and then they test it again at the time, and therefore I can drive away and I'm on the road. What you've said is sort of slightly disingenuous in terms of an MOT, because actually if you're saying you can't rectify the car, apart from possible dings and stuff like that, at the time when they come in to have it checked and all the rest of it, then clearly half of the problem is that they can't get it done there and then. And if you say you need pulled tyres, whatever it is that they've got to change, and so they have to come to you. They don't have a point of remedy because you presumably don't provide all of the services that are required to put a car back on the road. So clearly, I mean, I am absolutely behind the idea of having 2 working days, not 48 hours, but 2 working days of grace, a period of grace, given that the car would pass an MOT on the grounds that they come back and it is passed the next time, because actually, Nikki is right too, we don't want to have people going around for months and months when we know that the car is slightly substandard. It's not brilliant, but we have to have that period grace. And it also allows someone to go to a garage, if you can't do it, to get it done at whatever price they want to. So the cost is your test and not necessarily your engineering. So I don't know whether you have mechanical capability at your test centre. So that's, if you can answer that, I'd be grateful.
Obviously, as you say, we are the only station in the town that's allowed to carry out this test, but we tender for that contract. So other people are...
Just, if we could just let the gentleman answer the question first and then...
in the respect of doing repairs, we have a designated retest slot. We are not allowed to carry out repairs. It's part of the contract that we have, because we would have a vested interest possibly. We do assist the operators in the respect of if it is a minor, a bulb is in the wrong way round or the headlights need adjusting, then we do that on the test. So he will have a PRS, a pass and fail on site. And we also are flexible with that retest period in the respect of minor things. If they were to go away and be able to come back the same day, we try to squeeze them in between tests. There are 8 slots in the day, the tests take an hour each, and we try.
Sorry, Simon, could I interrupt? A lot of heads there are saying no, basically. They're saying no, it's not what you're saying, so...
Yeah, well, we definitely do. It can't always be done, but we do have a designated slot for retests. But obviously we understand that designated slot at 1 o'clock, they might not always be able to get their car repaired by that time. So we are flexible. We have actually offered as well to do retests on a Saturday morning, because we do realise that obviously one of the main earning times for the taxi drivers is Saturday evenings.
Nikki, you wanted to say something, then I'm going to go over to Councillor Sanders.
No, I think Simon has mentioned that the council does go through a formal tendering process and procurement process for its contract to provide the mechanical inspection.
Right, Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Is it age before beauty? Or
You're first.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. Can I just suggest, we're still waiting to hear from the taxi trade, and I'm sure we will before 6 o'clock tonight, but I just want to suggest 2 ways forwards out of this to try and reconcile the 2 issues we've got. The first I would not want to come from me, but I would want it proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson, seconded by Councillor Madden, that in B1, line 2 to 3, this is page 106. Yeah, so it's the recommendations, is to replace the words between the ages of 8 years and 10 years with the words of 8 years or more. So that means that any vehicle over 8 years is then assessed on individual merit, because it seems at the moment that basically enables everything you do to be done on a thing-by-thing basis. Right? So that's, as I say, it's not proposed by me, it's proposed by Councillor Vernon Jackson, seconded by Councillor Madden. The second one I would want proposed by me, which is again to deal with the MOT issue. I get the logic, and I also realise that these are people's livelihoods. So what I'm suggesting is that we add a recommendation D, which is that essentially, and I have to get the terminology correct for the type of vehicles we're talking about, but it's basically the ones Steve Pitt was talking about, that those vehicles, subject to current discretionary approaches to take on board Simon's point, are subjected to a probationary period of no longer than 2 working days, provided they essentially meet all the MOT regulations, everything Steve was talking about. This, by putting them on probation, which is what you would do with an employee who's done something wrong, but that it gives them an incentive to come back within 48 hours to make sure that that is fine, and then without driving them off the road. If they're sensible, they'll do it. If they're not sensible, 2 working days. No longer than 2 working days. Yeah. But we've got to check where the slots are. Thank you, Gerald. We've got to check where the slots are. So I think that way is a compromise. So between the policy, which is you've got to come off the road, and the need for taxi drivers in the real world to be on a livelihood. So it's treating them in the same way that a conventional employer would treat an employee who has effectively failed an MOT. The type of vehicles is exactly what Steve outlined, because I can't remember them, but I think that way round gets us through the impasse. But again, I wait to hear from the taxi driver colleagues.
Well, Mr. Antrim, you were
Yes,
Antrim. Sorry,
yes,
you were just going to
I think
say
it's
something.
probably helpful if I just give you some advice at this stage, Chair. I think the proposed amendment to the...
Councillor Vernon Jackson, wasn't it, I imagine, the first one?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you put it on record then that, once...
Before that,
the advice would be helpful.
Perhaps I could just give advice before
Right,
that.
just advice, first of all, sorry.
Sorry. So the proposed amendment, and that's how it stands at the moment, I see no issue with. That's a proposal to amend the wording of a recommendation within the report. It's within the agenda. The second point about the discretion to be offered and allowed so far as testing and retesting, that's a new issue, and I would suggest, Chair, that falls more comfortably within paragraph C, which states that if considered necessary to instruct officers to prepare a future report, together with any available evidence that would support any review of the policy, comes back in future for consideration. It's not a matter that's on the agenda.
Yeah, but time limited.
Just hold on a sec. So if we were going to go with what you've just said there, can we have a timed thing that this will be done and everything like so that it's not... Because the concern around the table is that it's going to take another 6-7 months for these people.
Hold on, 1 second, one person at a time.
I can't see any issue legally with setting a timescale as long as it's possible for licensing to actually comply with that timescale, and Nikki would be able to comment on that. The only issue I would say is, of course, it can't be within PERDA. Other than that.
Okay. Sorry, so that's what we've been advised, members. Councillor Vernon Jackson, did you propose that first thing?
Yes, so the first bit I'd like to formally propose the bit about changing those so the 8 years starts then, but there is no terminal point, as suggested by Councillor Sanders. I think that's absolutely right.
Let's do one at a time.
Yeah.
So we've got a proposal and a second.
In terms of personally, I'd like to make decisions now in terms of the retesting. But if it is insisted that we not do that, then in terms of coming back to that, I'd like to make sure that we come back to look at that in 2 weeks' time at the latest. It's in PERDA, but we make decisions in PERDA all the time. If we're going to say you can't do that, then I think we then have to say we will do it now. So I think that's the choice that I would set. The other bit that I would like your advice on is it seems to me that there are 2 varieties of vehicles which are very expensive for people to buy, but where we're trying to encourage people to do them. And I think if we're going to, which are for me, the electric vehicles, but also the WAVs. Wheelchair accessible vehicles, so the bigger ones that you can get. So both of those, as I understand it, are significantly more expensive than a normal can, and both of them are things that we want on our roads, and therefore to incentivise people to be able to go and do those, to have those, it seems to me you need to give them a decent time to be able to repay the capital investment. And therefore I'd have said that we allow them in the normal regime up to 12 years before you even get into the extra regime of the. And I think we need to, if we do this, we need to be really conscious of why we're doing it, because we want to improve air quality, but also make sure there are more vehicles on the road which can accept wheelchairs, and that's a service that people want.
Thank you very much.
But my real worry is that life has changed and the world's moved on. If we're almost operating as if that everything we decide means that every car within this city that's being used in the trade will be just like this. My worry is if we're not conscious of the fact that people can go and get their cars registered in other authorities and then effectively operate here, we are not living in the real world, and we have to recognise that. And I want as many people as possible to be registered here in Portsmouth and to be driving here in Portsmouth, and that's what we need to be doing.
Vicky, did you want to?
Can we do two bits of advice? One obviously from your legal advisor in terms of all your proposals, then secondly I'll try and give you some advice in terms of what you're intending or seeking to do.
Yes, I think so far as the legal standpoint is concerned, we're hearing a lot of new policy proposals which have not been tabled. They're not within the agenda. They haven't been published or properly circulated or consulted upon. So my advice to you is they should rightly fall within the precise element of the report that anticipated such things being raised, and has provided very clear opportunity for those to be consulted upon, to be properly formulated and to return at a future date. And my advice is that cannot take place during PERDA.
We can't do it for 2 weeks, coming back to you in 2 weeks. So you have to do it today.
No. My advice is it cannot be decided today.
Thank you for that. Okay. Should we do the First Amendment first of all? Councillor Pitt.
I'd like to ask the question, Chair. Is this the same, are we sitting here the same as the Queen with the right to be consulted, or do we have an active right to consult? And we have been consulted by the report. We have taken on board our point of view. We fully understand the measures that we are discussing. We are not lacking any information about those measures. The people able to provide the information about them are sat in the room. I do not understand what we gain by waiting 3 months to be told what we've been told today.
Councillor Harris.
I think this might be more of a technical problem rather than an actual. I get what you're saying, Steve, but it's effectively rewriting the report while we're actually in the meeting. So that is the issue. I totally get where you're coming from, but I totally get where you're coming from as well. I'd rather do it Steve's way than do it your way, if I'm honest, because we can get it done now, but I understand where the extension, I think is that where the technicality is coming from, effectively rewriting the report in the meeting.
Absolutely. I mean, this meeting is perilously close to the PERDA period in any event. And the reason why the report has been drafted in the way that it has is so that any new, fresh policy issues that officers have not had a proper opportunity to prepare for and ought to have a proper opportunity to do so, can have that opportunity, and that's why it's presented the way it is, so that they can be raised and they will be acknowledged and they will be properly dealt with, but just not now today and not during the PERDA period.
Councillor Sanders.
I have to say I understand the legal advice and I find it just mad. But I also have similar issues within my own housing portfolio with regards to particular things that are going on and awaiting the outcome of a legal decision, and then there's the case of what you do in the meantime. And what we've decided to do, working with the housing equivalent of the taxi trade, is to operate on a basic principle which is do no harm. So effectively what we've done is the equivalent of taking forward what I am going to propose today and essentially having that as an effective operating procedure pending the outcome of a legal decision. So in other words, what I am suggesting, I mean, if this is ruled out of order, and I don't think it should be, or at the very least we'll all be happy to come back in 2 weeks and sort it out, because I don't think this is controversial, which is the PERDA test, because this is not controversial in my view. is that we, in the meantime, until this is formally adopted, what I'm proposing becomes standard operating procedure. So in other words, we do this pending the outcome of a future report and a future decision and a future consultation. Because I'm trying to, either that, or I'm going to formally propose that we do this today. I suspect this committee is going to agree to it, and then we're going to be told by the legal bods, terribly sorry, we can't do this, we can't meet in 2 weeks, even though it's not controversial because it's been agreed by a cross-party committee, which sounds to me like the definition of non-controversial. And I find that is an understandable, but I think over-legalistic interpretation of what PERDA actually deals with, which is controversial issues. This does not appear to be a controversial issue, and so therefore there doesn't seem to me to be any PERDA-based definition of the problem. There may be we've got to go out to consultation and we've got to talk to everyone bit, but that ain't PERDA. That's the legalities of it all. If this is decided unanimously by a cross-party decision, this is therefore not a controversial decision. Therefore, it falls outside the classic what PERDA should be, as opposed to what several council officers may want it to be.
Members, could I make a suggestion to you, having regard to Councillor Sanders' concerns? What I could suggest to you that in terms of the issue of PERDA and outside of the agenda that Ben's advised you on today, we obviously have taken note of your concerns in relation to vehicles if there are unfairly being kept off the roads where they could work. We do have discussions between myself and Simon in terms of showing discretion with certain vehicles. I know I've had a discussion where I have seen a vehicle with accident damage, but have said to the garage, please put it as an advisory because the vehicle's not booked in till Monday. Don't suspend the licence. What I can offer to the committee in the meantime is that we will continue with that policy and drivers can bring that matter to my attention at any time. If they feel that there has been an unfair decision and that vehicle is off the road unfairly, we can make a decision whether it stays on or not. That opportunity is always there. Viv probably would say to me that those discussions happen regularly in the office. But I'm happy to say that if there is any failure that would keep an individual off the road for more than 24 hours, then we will come to us to have that discretion.
I've got three other councillors.
24, 48, 72.
Nikki, I've got three other councillors who want to chip in. I've got Councillor Leo Madden, and I've got Vernon Jackson, and I've got Councillor Pitt. So Councillor Leo.
Sorry, I just wanted. I just wanted to ask a question which I should have asked earlier on, because I don't know how big the problem is. How many vehicles at any one time may be off the road because of because of damage? No damage. Talking about damage rather than...
Again, that's why I would suggest to members that you need a report to gauge the scale of this.
Sorry.
I think it's minor.
Yeah, I would think it would, actually.
Yeah.
And I think if we're getting advice to say that PERDA is intervening, whether we like it or not, then we have to take that advice. Whether you meet in PERDA or not, I've never recalled having a meeting in PERDA, but Gerald has, right? But I think that if it is minor, and if you're going to allow a very discretion for you to say, let it carry on and drive and that on to the damage dealt with, if that's reported here, somehow or other within this, to say that, pending consideration of a properly considered paper, discretion will be allowed and all that sort of thing, I mean, I hope we could live with that, because I do think, I don't think we should rush into things. Particularly, there are legal implications for it, and somebody could take us to court or whatever because we haven't considered it properly, and not a paper in front of us. So I would think it's few and far between. I don't know, but again, depending, and the damage will be created probably by somebody else and not yourself. So I have more damage to my vehicle by me than anybody else. But however, there's a discretion within that for you to do that, and I think if that's written in here in this report, and members of the public gallery can take that away. I mean, that that would satisfy me. I don't know about other people.
Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Thank you. I think the detail, the bit about damage is probably it's a pretty small thing that we can, as long as there is a message from here to say it is sorted and that people won't be too harsh, and I'm sure people will tell us if they are. So I think we can pick Steve's point up there in a fairly simple operational bit. The bit that worries me is the advice that we are getting that amendments that we might want to put down to a report that's come to us, we can't do. And in which case,
just to respond to that, I've acceded that the amendment that was proposed was perfectly fine. It's introducing entirely new policy points that are fresh, that aren't actually detailed in the report.
So the age of vehicles is dealt with in the report.
That's fine. So that's the amendment that you've been
fine.
That you've
so
proposed.
So you're okay with that to go forward?
Yeah.
Okay. So the other bit, in terms of the electric and accessible vehicles, are you happy for that to go forward as well? No, okay, so that's where I think I have a problem, because having talked to Nikki about this in the past, when we had discussions about this, my concern is, how do we get stuff done and on this agenda? And I'm sorry, I will push that amendment, because I think this is absolutely the right thing to do, because that's what the licensing committee is meant to do. We're meant to set licensing policy. And if we're going to be told, at the moment I spend my life being patted on the head, metaphorically, by government ministers and told to go away and not worry my little head about it, because they'll make sure everything's right and the city won't grind to a halt. I kind of feel I'm having the same thing done to me here. And our job here is, the point of having a licensing committee is to set licensing policy. That's why we're here. We've got a report that talks about these things, and I'm to say to us that you're here to do licensing policy, but you're not allowed to make decisions about the licensing policy is wrong. And so I'm sorry, I will press both the amendments and see how they get through.
So can I suggest to you that the amendment that you've put forward in terms of wheelchair accessible vehicles, and that we have currently licensed, and that increasing their age, that is accomplishable as the amendment that you've put forward today?
So that completely misses the point. We have to be sending a clear message to people who want to invest their hard-earned cash into expensive vehicles, that it's worth their while doing something that we want them to do.
Surely the committee would want to make an informed decision on facts on how those vehicles can be best licensed and how much time that they can have on the road, because we can discuss with other licensing authorities who have such electric vehicles and what policies they give. We would be able to give you advice that would allow you to make an informed decision on, it could be 15 years that those vehicles could stay on rather than an arbitrary 10.
But then Nikki, if we make a decision now and you think we're barking, you can come back with a report and show us we're barking. But
can I suggest, members, because you have another agenda item on this report which discusses wheelchair accessible vehicles, and its designated list under 165, you haven't even adopted a list of wheelchair accessible. Maybe we just have to suggest do it in stages, get the list, and come back to you with the list, and then we can look at ages.
No, I'm sorry, I think we actually need to move. One of my problems with this committee is that there are things that we want to do, or I'm trying to get that, and it takes forever to get them onto an agenda. And therefore I don't want to be stultified in treacle. I'd actually like us to do something.
Some more advice?
Well,
I think we're going to run out of it.
I think what I'm going to have to say is that perhaps Chair, you can propose a short adjournment whilst contact is made with the monitoring officer, because currently the committee has received my advice and it appears to be.
Hold on a second.
It appears to be.
Hold on 1 second. Thank you. I'm just getting advice here.
For those that can't hear me, what I'm proposing is that there's a short adjournment whilst the monitoring officer is contacted, because currently the committee has received legal advice from myself, and it appears to be proposing to proceed in a different vein to legal advice, and so I'm suggesting that a short adjournment is sought just to clarify that particular issue going forwards.
Councillor Lee,
Chair, can I suggest that's fine? Because if you need to take advice, you need to make. But could we hear from the deputations? They've been here for some time now, and I'd like to hear. They will have a view on it anyway. But I think get the legality in relation to whether we can or can't.
Everyone's trying to shout at me and trying to get chip in, which is lovely. I like what you're saying.
All the solicitor can do is give us advice. It's up to us whether to take it or not. But he wants to confirm that what he's saying stands up.
I do want to break off and get proper legal advice as well, just to make sure.
Well, I don't think Sorry, Chair, I'm suggesting you don't break off, that we hear the deputations. We've been sitting here for some time, we'll have views on this, and hopefully other things.
Okay, Councillor Pitt, and I've got Councillor Lyne.
No, I can't allow.
1 second, Councillor Lyne, first of all.
Can I suggest that actually what we have in front of us is the entire licensing policy to do with taxis and drivers, and if we are sitting in a licensing subcommittee, then we are allowed to use all of the papers that we have in front of us to inform our decisions about anything there is. There is nothing that does not relate, as far as I know, that's in the licensing in the licensing committee and everywhere else that does not relate to private hire and hackney carriages. It's a lot of paperwork. If you're asking us to read it and not make a decision that we can out of the information that's in front of us, or indeed to make recommendations beyond those that someone has arbitrarily said that that's all they're prepared to allow us to look at and consider and actually answer, I think that makes us, as usual, officer-led and officer-driven.
Thank you for your comment, Councillor Pitt, and then I'm going to go over to the deputations.
I can be very helpful to the committee this afternoon by stating a previous example of business not on the agenda at a decision-making meeting, which this is, being introduced on the agenda and coming to summary decision purely by the Cabinet member, never mind a cross-party committee. And I apologise for the subject matter, but it's the only example I can think of right now, and that's the revocation of the MB parking zone in my ward. The reason it's very familiar to me is I'm intimately acquainted with the issue. It was not on the agenda at the decision meeting. A review of the MC zone was. The Cabinet member suddenly said, and while I'm at it, his exact words, I'm taking away MB zone as well. If it's good enough for Councillor Ken Elcombe, sat in T&T decision meeting, it's good enough for a cross-party committee. For the reasons that Councillor Lyon has just outlined, we are not creating new policy. We are amending an existing policy which we are all fully aware of.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to go over to the deputations.
Sorry, Chair, I think we still, if a legal advisor is asking to seek advice, then we should allow him to seek advice. We don't have to accept it at the end of the day, but I want to be clear that what I'm deciding on is not illegal or against the rules. Yeah?
So would members like to do the deputations and a break after that? Okay. Deputations. Viv, do you want... sorry, we just timing-wise, you get 6 minutes, if that's okay.
I only want to say a short thing.
Please. Do you want to go first, Bruce?
Yeah, you've changed.
So off we go now.
Right. You've changed where we're going from, and that it seems to be to-ing and fro-ing. You're saying about the legal advice, which is the last bit, to change anything that we're actually discussing in that lot. But the committee, not all you learned people here, when they changed the law from 12 years...
No, sorry, Councillor Van Jack shouldn't leave the room without this going on. There is a conversation going. He's either going to come in here or I carry on and he's not counted. So, Well, she would have the decency to have told me. So we have to take the adjournment now, sorry, because he's not here, and I don't want anyone throwing it that it's wrong if we go to a vote, that's all. I do apologise. Quick 5 minutes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can we start making our way to the tables, please? Sorry, Councillor. Hello? Hello, everyone. Can I draw you all back to the meeting, please?
Please.
Thank you very much. Is everybody, Councillor, back here with us? Can I remind councillors not to leave during the debate, please? Because, well... Right, so... Beforehand, we've had some chats and we'll come back to you in a minute, but we're going to carry on and we're going to ask Bruce, you've got 6 minutes, please, to do your deputation. 6 minutes, starting from now.
Thank you very much indeed. Going through your recommendations, your recommendations that any vehicle presented for temporary use licence shall be under 2 years old. I agree with that, don't have a problem with that on temporary vehicles. I do have a bit of a contention with it says vehicles from 0 to 4 years of age, 1 full test per year, and then you say 4 years of age and over 2 full tests a year, where your policy at the moment is 5 years old. Okay, but it says 4 in this. Okay. I agree with Councillor Vernon Jackson and Councillor Pitt and Councillor Saunders about the 8 years or more. I agree with that. Coming to the legal advice that we broke on, the council here did not, although most of you weren't there at the time, did not seek legal advice when they changed it from the original 12 years for a wave vehicle, wheelchair access vehicle, to 8. They did it there and then, with no commotion, done, and we were stunned that you'd done it. So, you know, to me, it was already in place originally, and I don't think you had that big a problem with it. You made a decision there and then to go all vehicles 8 years. I don't agree with it. I still don't agree with it. They are 3 times as much as a normal saloon car, and no man in his right mind will spend 30 grand on a vehicle to only have it on the road for 8 years. It is not commercial viable. Okay? Now, on the subject of the traffic light system that Addersmore use, if you get a red fail, that car is off the road, finished. It cannot go back. It cannot get fixed. It's off the road. If it has the engine management light come on, and it's off completely, and he puts a big red mark a big black mark in the red box, that car is finished. You can't go and get a new ECU, get it changed and everything else. It's done. So we need to look at what we're actually doing, you know, on the vehicles and that with dents, chips. They won't change light bulbs. Okay, if it fails on a light bulb, it fails. Finished. Until it goes back in for a retest. Little dents and stuff like that, yeah, the car should be cosmetic. We should be all proud to be supporting Portsmouth City Council. The car should be kept up together and everything else, and drivers have the right to look after them and, you know, protect the customer and wave the flag for Portsmouth City Council. I totally agree with that, but you don't use a hammer to crack a nut. You don't do it, okay? And that's really all I have to say. Well, sorry, the last thing, we're looking at the green cars, fully electric cars. Now, if you're looking at those, the amount of money they are, for any driver to even contemplate buying that, they will have to do their sums between 15 and 20 years just to get their money back. And at the moment, Portsmouth City has not got the infrastructure to have nearly 1,200 private hire vehicles to be charging nightly or daily. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Me, I think the infrastructure to go first, our industry will follow. That's how it's going to go. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Well said. Viv, got 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillors, for some of your very constructive comments. I'd like to keep it at 5 years, as it is now, and off at whenever, no set time. You may wish to tamper with this slightly and say it must be Euro 6 specification. The Euro 6 specification, Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, 1st of September 2015 had to be, but some vehicles prior to that were already Euro 6 compliant.
It's Euro 4. It's Euro 4 on petrol.
I feel the trade will gradually change over to the environmentally acceptable vehicles as they become more readily available and the prices become more competitive. For example, there's a Skoda Superb hybrid coming out later this year or early next year. Temporary vehicles, yeah, 2 years, happy with that. Vehicle tests, up to 5 years, 1 test, over 5, 2 a year. You may be thinking, or maybe the committee want to think about, the in-between test, when you're on 2 tests, the in-between one being an MOT. You may want to look at this. Safety is of course paramount, and an MOT certificate would ease those concerns. Adams Moray, whoever is approved a tester, can then go over the vehicle with a fine tooth comb on annual inspection. This would help to ease the pressure on Adams Moray at certain times when it can take several days to book in. I endorse, as Nicky said, getting rid of the mini-test. Can I ask councillors what they deem to be the most important from a safety point of view? Would you say the braking system or a stained seat from safety? Hopefully you'd say a braking system. Lo and behold, Simon will correct me if I'm wrong, braking is not on a mini-test. At the moment, any vehicle you've got can be taxed on, up to 3 years old can be taxed online. Over 3 years old, this cannot be done because compliance certificate is not recognised. If you had an MOT, it would remove this anomaly. Multi-seaters and wheelchairs, I believe that the policy should be adapted to encourage people to buy these vehicles. They cost more to run. The travelling public want multi-seat vehicles far more than wheelchair accessibles. Unfortunately, the multis are being replaced by the small 4-seat rear loaders. It's fair to say that there's very little need to have a WAV when operating as a hackney carriage. The larger vehicles used for buggies and dogs and multiple occupancy. The Pompey fleet of wheelchair access hacks admirably copes with any occasional need for that service. Chairman, I've sent pictures of 16-year-old vehicles in Havant. You're nodding, you got them good. And cows on the Isle of Wight. Havant cows similar to Pompey. You've recently received pictures of 20 and 21-year-old WAVs in Chichester. Similar to us, the people in Chichester. Residents of Pompey would be happy of that. No, I'm not asking for 20-year-old vehicles, not even 16. But maybe the council can amend the policy for this type of vehicle, whether it be hack or private hire. Many of my work colleagues, Simon won't like this, has asked, can there be an alternative to Adams Moray, who at times are sometimes a tad draconian with their testing procedures? We as Pompey licensed taxis and private hire cars suffer much damage, broken windows, bottles, bricks, eggs thrown at a car, windmills kicked off, etc. Maybe the inspection on the visual sides needs toning down a bit. We have no safe problems with safety, which is of course paramount. Other licensed areas are happy that the vehicle has an MOT and or engineer's report. The livery on taxis and hire cars in this city is an issue that will be raised with the council in the near future, not today, but to make you aware there are rumblings in the camp. Due to this useless cross-border hiring legislation, we at Pompey are competing with hundreds of out-of-town taxis and hire cars. This is not a level playing field. Many of the drivers of these out of area vehicles live in Pompey, draw housing benefit from us, but they choose to licence elsewhere. No Pompey geography tests, no CCTV, no driver test, no disability training, no livery, unlikely have done CSE training. But it proves the public don't care where the vehicle is licensed, how old it is, or who is driving it. I've been a cab driver in Pompey for 43 years, and I wouldn't have the knowledge to get a Havant or Fareham driver's licence. So how does a non-indigenous driver who resides in Portsmouth manage the licence in Havant? Something ain't right here. I hate to say this, but under present legislation, you want to be an Uber partner, you would have to be deluded to licence with Pompey Council. Easing some of the stringent licensing policy may help to reverse this trend. More revenue for Pompey Council. Our Pompey North MP, Mrs Mordaunt, calls these liberating measures. Really? I would call it dangerous and not in the interest of public safety. Sadly, at the moment, Pompey Council have no control over this. Scott, maybe you can have a word in her shell when you see her. Councillors, when making your decision, please bear in mind that the buses you subsidise, you pay for, we pay for, do not get retired when they're 8 years old. It's not viable. Well, same applies to us. I followed down here today a 55 plate, Park and Ride, the university ones, 55, 13, 14 years old, dodgy paintwork, badly fitting panels. But that's okay with you guys, when you don't condone it, you subsidise it. That's chugging through the town centre and goes round by the Ibis. Myself and my work colleagues want to work with Pompey Council to improve air quality in our city, not just for us but for future generations. Electric hybrid vehicles is the future, but not at just shy of 60,000 as myself and some of you saw yesterday. But I'm sure cheaper alternatives will be on the market in the very near future. Councillors, we are Pompey licensed drivers. Support your local trade. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Viv. Can I also, Viv, thank you, as you know, I'm retiring after this meeting, or maybe another one, but just to let you know, thank you for what you do for the Pompey trade and your emails. I know they're long, and I sit through them all at night, but thank you for that. So, then thank you for speaking up for people, Viv, as well, so thank you. Okay, so that's the creepy bit done. So now let's ask Simon. Simon, you came up to me early on, you wanted a quick word, didn't you, just to tell a few people so that we can just explain before we move on, please. I think it's important.
Yes, it was just to make the point that obviously if any decision is made about dispensation for people having 48 hours or 2 working days, whatever it happens to be, I think we need to be very clear on the elements of the test that we allow that for. Because there are certain elements that you say, you know, if it's not an MOT available item, but there are certain elements, especially on the Hackney vehicles, grab handles, interlocking systems, communication systems, that could be seen as a safety-related issue, but they're not part of an MOT test. So we would definitely need clarification on items that would be covered in that.
Councillor Vernon-Jackson, please.
I think we during the break there was a possibility to talk to the council's monitoring officer in terms of legal advice, and I think if we're going to be advised about that now, that might then give us an idea of where to go from there.
That's what, yeah. So do you want, because you made a phone call half time, didn't you?
Yes.
And I just wanted to know what's the outcome basically? What's the recommendation now?
So, in accordance with standing orders, we ought not to be adding things to the agenda today, but in terms of returning
within 2 weeks or whatever period may be determined, that providing the issue is not controversial and it appears on a cross-party basis that's the case, then that ought to be permissible.
Thank you very much. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
In which case, that seems the sensible thing to do, to come back in 2 weeks with a report, and I think you have been very clear about things that need to be there in terms of things for us to make decisions, and thank you for taking that advice. If that is so, I wonder if it would be possible at the same time for Simon to come back with a list of those things which he thinks it is permissible for there to be a 48-hour or 2 working day wiggle room on, and those that are not, so that everybody has it in writing, so we can't yell and scream about it later. So I'm happy to look at that advice, but what I would want to do is to make sure, and I'm sorry, I'm not a member of the trade, so if the advice from the trade is that we need to be looking at electric vehicles, WAVs, but also the multi-seat things, then again, if we've got that in 2 weeks' time, if we can have a recommendation on each of those separately, we can make a decision on each of those separately, but on the basis of having some writing. I'm sorry I'm making people suggesting people coming back, but it's what I don't want is for us to put off stuff that's been around and people in trade have been talking about for years and years.
Okay, that's your view, Councillor. We'll see if it passes. Councillor Sanders, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the basis of that legal advice, I'm happy to withdraw my proposal from earlier on, because I suspect it's coming back in 2 weeks anyway, but would support Gerald in the idea of actually giving us a list of what can and can't be done in any 2 working day probationary period, because I think that would be hugely helpful. I would say to Bruce that some of the stuff that he's been talking about with regards to green cars is some of the stuff that we're lobbying DFT and DEFRA about, because it's rather important. So we've already picked up a significant amount of that, and that's why we're asking for some cash to try and help us facilitate that. So just to say that, we're on it already. Whether we'll get anywhere, we don't know, but it is rather important. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ben for the constructive approach.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sanders. Ben, yeah.
Thank you. I think in terms of that withdrawal having been put forward, might I suggest, Chair, that it would make much more sense for the whole item simply to come back, rather than messing around, making amendments, not making amendments, for the whole item to come back in 2 weeks' time or whatever date that's set, for further discussion at that stage.
Members quite happy with that. So I've just got to find out a date now. So we're saying 2 weeks, Nikki. How is that feasible?
I would request from the committee if I had 2 weeks in order to do some research and get some empirical evidence for you to support your decision for whatever age you will actually determine for vehicles. 2 weeks would give me adequate time to undertake that. But obviously you have a week where the reports need to be published in advance. So I'm led by yourselves. Yes, obviously it would aid me if I had 10 working days to get that report, and then you've got a 5-day publishing period. But if I want to limit me to 5 working days, then it's entirely for officers.
Friday the 12th at 2:30 in the afternoon.
That's what you're proposing, Councillor. I've got to look at my diary first of all. I'm just as important as you, sir. Thank you very much. So are other people around the table. Right, so the proposed date is the 12th of April at 2:30. 2:30. 2:30, please, Councillor. It suits me better, and I'm the chair. Thank you.
There you are.
Okay. Yes, councillor.
Request as well.
Yes.
This may not be popular.
Excuse me, ladies and gents, please. Councillor Lyne speaking.
This may not be terribly popular with our guests today, but as we know, we unanimously passed the motion of a climate emergency in this city. And one of the things that I think adds to that emergency is a lot of private cars that are travelling in the city because there is a lack, I think, though I'm told by other people there isn't, of hackney carriages that can pick people up from the street. And I think we need to look again at the fact that for 25 years we've had the same number of hackney carriages in this city, and we've had an increasing population. We have people doing pretty different things from what they were doing 25 years ago, and that we ought finally to break the moratorium on increasing the number of cars available. I think it helps the drivers to be able to be both private hire and hackney carriages, and I think we should look at that because if we're having another meeting, we have another agenda, and I'd like that to be on the agenda, please.
Right, thank you very much for that. I've got Councillor Vernon Jackson followed by Councillor Harris.
My understanding is if to do that and to make a decision, you have to do it on the basis of a survey. No, don't have to do a survey. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Okay.
Would you like me to clarify,
yes,
Chair?
please.
If members wish to remove the quantity restriction, then they do not need a survey to do that. They can just make that by resolution. The only justification for having a survey is if you wish to still keep limits or, without removing those restrictions.
Sounds like music to my ears. Councillor Harris.
I'm going to respectfully disagree with my Conservative colleague on this. Well, I just respectfully disagree, and I'm sorry. I've been out of the licensing team, and I see hackneys queued at ranks because they can't get jobs. And I've actually, this is a true story, I've told Viv this story. I spoke to the hackney driver 7th in the queue at the rank, went to the cinema for 2.5 hours, and when I come out he was actually first. So, I don't think putting more of them on the road is actually a better idea. I think it actually causes more problems.
Okay, I've got Councillor Leo Madden.
Sorry, Chair, just item 7, that would be the task and finish group, actually has a recommendation in there in relation to the number of what local authorities can do. So I wonder if we could leave it to that stage. I was also wondering whether the deputations will be here for item 7 or not, unfairly to them. Otherwise, there's a couple of recommendations that jump out to me. Could I put them to them at this stage before they leave, if that's okay?
Fine, I'll be with that. Everyone else fine with that? Yep.
Well, could I just say, and I had a word with Vic before, recommendation 8 from the task and finish. This is the government, a paper, and this is the government's response to it, okay. Page 363, and it actually talks about the item we were last talking about. Government should legislate to allow local licensing authorities, where a need is proven, through a public interest test, to set a cap on the number of taxi and private hire vehicles they license. There's a bit of a narrative to it, but essentially that's what it's saying. So I'd be interested in your views on that. We've just discussed it, and then another recommendation I'll come on to in a minute, Bruce, if that's okay.
Okay, a recommendation, I saw that in that report. They do it for hackney carriages, although Councillor Lawrence is just asking for you to review it. On private hire, do I have an issue with it? No, I don't, but I think what they ought to do is look at the overall picture of Portsmouth City Council and the housing and the growth, the population and everything else, and look at it maybe not every 3 years, maybe every 2, to see if anybody else wants to come into the market, etc., etc. The only problem you will have with that is it's okay Portsmouth restricting the amount of hackney carriages or the amount of private hire carriages, but what are Portsmouth City Council going to do with the amount of non-Portsmouth plated vehicles working in this area?
That's the main thing, yeah.
That's the biggest issue I would have with it.
Can I just say in relation to that, Bruce, because we might want to answer this. Actually, recommendation 11 from the task and finish comes into that, and this is what it says. Government should legislate that all taxi and PHV journeys should start and or end within the area from which the driver, vehicle and operator, brackets PHVs and taxis are licensed. And appropriate members should be put in place. We'll be deciding whether we're going to agree with that, but the narrative says that the area may not be confined to Portsmouth, I have to say. It could be a wider area, but nevertheless it will be a defined area.
I don't have a problem with a confined area. I would say out of...
Defined area. It could take in having Fareham, Gosport, for instance.
Okay.
Plus Portsmouth route.
Yep, I don't have an issue with that. I do have an issue with people coming out of Leeds, Huddersfield, Liverpool, Manchester, coming down here.
Yeah. Sorry, Bruce.
No, they're not licensed here. They work down here.
Can I just?
No, they can't.
Can I just stop? Can I just stop everyone there for Mr. Atron just tell you a few things that you just whispered in my ear?
I was just saying. Obviously, we've got built into this report the opportunity to bring fresh matters for reconsideration in terms of policy back to the committee in future. But I think the fact that you've agreed to reconvene in 2 weeks' time to consider certain aspects ought not to open up every potential policy decision that you can possibly think of, because we've got to be realistic here about what can actually be dealt with by officers within 3 weeks and properly be presented back to you within 3 weeks' time. If you're proposing for the limit on hackneys to be released, and that in my experience is generally speaking a report in its own right can take as much time as we've spent discussing already today in its own right. I would suggest that it would be too much to expect the committee to deal with that in 2 weeks' time. If you want to propose it to come back in due course or within a certain time period,
Councillor Leo, Madam, first.
Sorry, just to say, it's the government's response. It's not for us to make a decision today. I was just seeking the views as to whether that's what the Trail would be interested in. I think it's laid before us today, and we'll go through it. Hopefully, I know it's a bit late, but hopefully the recommendations we'll go through them and give a view on it. That's all.
Councillor Vernon Jack, did you quickly want to say something?
Yes, I'm just wanting to check that agenda item 6. We are deferring for a new and additional report, and has the committee made that decision?
I'm just about to say, that, not yet, but I'm just about to say that when everyone's... Yeah, Councillor Lange?
To respond, I agree entirely with our legal advice, were it not for the fact that it is national policy, and what we have to, certainly in terms of numbers of hackney carriages, it is national policy.
Yes.
Sorry,
So it's national policy not to restrict the number of hackney carriages in an area, and the only reason you'd have to have a report is if we wanted to go against national policy, which is if we have to have a report for unmet need in order, or met need in order to go against national policy. So that in itself does not require a report. It is simply a question of a resolution as to whether we change our minds from going against national policy or complying with it.
Councillor Udy.
More of a legal question, actually. Since we've just taken advice and we're meeting in Perdare on an item that we've all agreed on that we're going to adjourn because we were working on a report, we might do that in a minute, but I think wouldn't it be unwise if we take a whole new committee, a whole new item that some people might disagree with right now into Perdare?
Well, it's not a new item, it's on the agenda for today.
The new
delimitation of hackney carriages is an entirely new topic, and it is a massive point. I understand what you're saying, but I think the reality is that if you're going to make a real decision on the point, you will either decide to delimit or not to, and if you decide not to, then you will need the evidence base to do that, and you'll need the reports that have been undertaken in the surveys, etc., to justify that decision.
Viv, you've got your hand up. Did you just want a quick point, please? Two things.
Just to answer Councillor Lyons, old saying, you retain quantity. You listening? You retain quantity to retain...
My name wrongly again.
Lyons.
Lion. It's not, it's a singular.
No, it's singular lion, okay. Right, old saying, you retain quantity to retain quality. And total deregulations will make that worse. Now, some of you's on my email list, Scott, Gerald, David, Nicky, all on my email, the guys are on the email list. There's lists of drivers wanted. People are looking for drivers for Hackney and private hire, so, you know, we can't get drivers.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to hand over to, I think we're going to start putting things together now, I think, if we can, because we can go round in circles now, I'm getting tired. So can you put a proposal that what we're going to do, and then we can vote on that, and then that's done?
Well, I would suggest that the appropriate wording may well be that item 6 be deferred until the 12th of April at 2:30 p.m. And that the additional issues, and I'll be guided here as to the...
Because age limits for...
So age limits for wheelchair accessible vehicles, for multi-passenger vehicles and electric vehicles be added to the agenda for that meeting for specific consideration. I don't advise that it go further than that at this stage.
I really don't mind, but I'm going to propose a motion to the committee that we also review the MOT testing regime at that time along the lines that I have specifically outlined and requested to this committee today.
My apologies that I overlooked that entirely. I thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yes, the...
You're happy with that? Okay, so that's the proposal on the table.
Is that we did actually discuss the taxi provision and the Hackney carriages in this city.
If we're going to do a piece of work, I am really pushy with sometimes with what I want out of council officers. I have been told. I find that surprising, but I think we have to be realistic in terms of people's capacity. 2 weeks is a short turnaround time, and this is a major thing we're asking people to do, and I think that we should concentrate on those specific issues. So I think if we want to look at that, I think that's fine to look at for the next scheduled proper meeting of the committee. Personally, I don't think it's necessary because I think it works relatively well. But if people do want to come back to the next scheduled meeting would be a sensible thing.
No, I think I'm only going to put my foot down here and take what you're saying and what Councillor Pitt's put in there. So we all understand what we're going to talk about on the 12th. That's it. No more to the table. Yes. Yes, everybody agreed with that, round the table. Unanimous? Yes? Hands up? Yep. If we didn't get anybody going, that's unanimous then. Okay then. So item 6 on 12th April, 2:30. That's that bit. Thank you. So we're going back to 5. Item 5 now. Thank you. Section, 165, 167, the Equality Act, 22, wheelchair accessible vehicles. Do you want to introduce us? Yeah, there's a couple of people want a comfort break for a couple of minutes. Okay, hold on, it's my meeting. Thank you. Right, sorry, have you finished, sir? Thank you, we're still carrying on, thank you. Item 5 then, thank you. Thank you. You want to introduce it then? Lovely, thank you.
Members, agenda item 5 is it's another two-part report. This is firstly to advise you about the provisions of the Equality Act 2010 insofar as they relate to wheelchair accessible vehicles, and for you today to determine whether you would wish to instruct officers to compile a list of designated vehicles in accordance with those provisions. The recommendations in that report set out the proposed process if the licensing committee wishes to progress the introduction of that list. 167 of the Act, just as background quickly for you, permits but doesn't require the licensing authority to maintain a list of accessible taxis in private hire. But if you do maintain that list, then there becomes a statutory requirement for all drivers of those vehicles to provide assistance to those passengers, and it also prevents them from charging extra for the use of those vehicles. Drivers can apply for exemptions from assisting either on medical or other physical grounds, which would make it impossible for them to comply with the requirement for assistance. Statutory guidance has been produced and is Appendix A, page 85 of that report. Paragraph 7 of the report you have suggests, which is from the statutory guidance, sets out a process that it is recommended that officers or licensing authorities carry out in terms of adopting and designating such a list. Members, you may want to receive a further report after Action 3, as it puts on that report, but equally, if you consider that delegation can be given to officers to designate those vehicles and bring up suitable medical guidance notes, then you can make that decision today without referral back to this committee.
Thank you. Sorry, have you finished, Nikki?
Quickly. Can I just say that there is a right of appeal in relation to for proprietors, if they are included on the list of designated vehicles, they have a right to appeal to the Magistrates Court, and also paragraph 3.17 sets out the current licensed vehicles offering wheelchair accessibility in the city. And if I give you that in comparison to the numbers, so we have currently 87 wheelchair accessible vehicles in the city out of 234 hackney carriage vehicles. And we have 31 private hire vehicles out of a fleet of today 910. I don't think there's anything, I'm sure you've all read the report, I should just answer questions for you if you have. All I can say is that you have an equality impact assessment attached as Appendix B to your report, and that has been produced in consultation with our equalities unit.
Thank you, Nikki. Councillor Vernon Jackson, please.
Thank you. You'll be pleased to know I'm going to have to disappear in a moment because I've got to go to my next thing. But could I propose an amendment to the recommendation 2, first bullet point, in line 3 after the word of this report, I would say, comma, in consultation with the trade, the Portsmouth Disability Foundation and the City Forum, and the City Council's Equality Officer.
Okay.
On the basis, well, we all know her, she's in a wheelchair, so she's got expert advice to give us. It isn't.
Because I saw the officer in question yesterday and we were talking about the fact that...
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Unrelated, I saw the
Sorry,
yesterday.
okay.
Could I just draw members' attention to the equality impact assessment, because we have actually addressed that we have consulted with those organisations, and we have also consulted, it's in your equality strategy.
I still want it into the recommendations because it's really important that we write it in, and so it's there.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Okay. Everyone happy with that? Yes, Nikki, fine with that? It's got to be seconded. Seconded. Councillor Leo Madden seconded it.
So what are we agreeing to?
To put the amendment.
No.
Yeah, everyone happy with the amendment? Yes? Fine. Okay, everyone happy? Yes, so that can go in. Councillor Scott Harris and then Councillor Leo Madden.
Just a point of clarity really with Nikki, if I may. This is pretty much what we went over in resources back in January, isn't it, that we spoke about?
Yes, it is. It's bringing this to the committee now to make that decision.
Okay, no worries. I'm satisfied everyone's been consulted. They should have been.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leo Madden.
Yeah, just on the point that Nikki made in relation to the officer advice bit on page 79, whether we want a report back or not, I would suggest not. But I would suggest that the second bullet point be amended to say in consultation with the committee chair.
Yeah. Yes, good idea.
Okay. Is that a proposal again? Yeah, proposal by Leo Madden. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Vernon Jackson. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Number 5, is done.
Voted on the actual proposal.
Oh, sorry, you're going to vote for the proposal
Yeah,
for
as amended.
as amended. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you. It looks like unanimous. Anyone against? Thank you. That was unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So swiftly moving on to we're almost there. 7 and 8. Haven't we got number 7 to go, which is a report of the task and finish group of taxi and private hire vehicle licensing update on government response. So the purpose of the report is to inform the committee about work undertaken by the task and finish group and publish response by the government and its recommendations. Nikki, please. Gerald's left us.
Members, as the report title suggests, quite straightforward. It is just an advisory note for you in terms of actions that have been taken recently. First of all, the publication of the report by the Task and Finish Group on licensing of the taxi and private hire industry, and also the update on the government's response to those recommendations. The purpose of the setting up of the group, or the task force group, was to consider the evidence currently available relating to the adequacy of the current licensing scheme and to make recommendations for actions to address any of those issues they considered as a priority. In total, there were 34 recommendations that came out of that report or that group, and you have Appendix A 285 and Appendix B, page 353, which sets out the government's response to those recommendations. There were a lot of recommendations. I'm just going to summarise a couple that would perhaps have been best of most interest with the members and the trade. It recommended national minimum standards. It suggested it wanted updating of the best practice guidance, which you considered as your item number 4. It wants a statutory definition of both applying for hire and pre-booked. Conditions to compel drivers to comply with authorised officers in other areas. That's recognising the cross-border issues. It wants CCTV in licensed vehicles. National standards to assist the public in distinguishing between taxis, private hire vehicles and unlicensed vehicles. Safeguarding training, which looks at child sexual exploitation and sexual abuse for all drivers. It looks at English, it wants English proficiency tests and assessments, and that council should set up lists of designated wheelchair accessible vehicles. Those are the key highlights. Obviously if you've read the report, you know there are a number more, and that's just to bring it to note for the committee.
Okay, Councillor Madden, did you want to say anything?
I just want to say, can we do as we did with 6 and go through the recommendations page by page, just to see that everybody's happy if there's any response we'd like to make? I know it's a government response, but I just think, hopefully to speed things up. Let's start at page 291.
Okay then, so page...
Sorry, is it
Page 291.
354 where you've got the government response?
No, 291. Page 291.
List of recommendations.
Page 291.
Summarise the recommendations.
So you want to go through each page, yeah? Okay, 291 then, page 291. Everybody happy? 292, 293, 294, 295, 296, 297. That's it. I did. I've got 297 on there. Oh, sorry. Yeah, 296. It finished. Sorry. You're correct. Yeah, everyone happy with that then? That's it then? Okay then?
Could I move the recommendation, which is just to note the report?
Thank you very much, Councillor Madden. Yes, so everybody's happy with that. Everyone will show, just in case. Hands up. Seconded. Seconded. Councillor Sanders seconded it. He's sorry. Unanimous again. Thank you, Nikki, for that. So we've got number 8, isn't it? Or was that done? Number 8. Fixed odd bettings. Update. Yeah. Fixed odd bettings, terminals, update and legislation changes. Please, Nikki. Finish off with.
Members, I'm going to make this the quickest agenda item that you've had so far. You will be aware from your own statement of licensing policy that you adopted in 2017, the concerns relating to these fixed odds betting terminals, and that a maximum stake could be of £100 could be applied within a matter of seconds because of the way these machines worked. The government has consulted on the risks, and due to those responses, they are issuing new regulations which reduce the stakes for those machines from £100 to £2, and those measures will come into effect on the 1st of April. There is nothing that we need to do as a licensing authority, because obviously it's a statutory regulation, and we just will amend our records to show that what the maximum stakes are. So that's it. It's just to note that the government has reduced them significantly.
Councillor Leo, madam.
To say hello, Lord Mayor. Just to say, Chair, that this of course reflects the policy of the City Council anyway, that we passed a notice of motion some time back saying that we are concerned about the fixed whatever, yeah. But something's been done, and happily a minister resigned because it wasn't done in enough time for her. Thank you.
Okay then, so Councillor Pitt.
I'll just note that Bruce is still sat there, and I'm wondering if there's something else he was expecting to say or contribute. No. That's all right then.
No, not that I'm aware of. So
I thought we might have skipped past you, and that's all right. That's
okay. So going back to just before we start, going back to number 8, can we have a proposal? You propose that that's fine. Yeah. Seconder, Councillor Coles is seconded. Please. Proposer is Councillor Leo Madden. Seconder is Councillor Cole. Everybody please, show of hands. If agreed? Yep. Okay. Anybody against? No one? That's it. Okay. Oh, sorry. You vote against. Right. So, yeah. Noting the report. Okay. So, okay then, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's just about it for today. Can I thank everybody for coming today?
Before we formally close the meeting, unlike Theresa May, I think I probably do speak on behalf of everybody here when I say thank you to you, Chair.
I'm coming back again.
Oh, you are coming back again?
Oh, yeah,
yes, of course, 12th of April. For your final appearance on the 12th of April.
He's so good, Ben, we're keeping him for another meeting.
I'll have the flowers later, but no. We'll see you back here on the 12th of April, 2:30, and I'll have milk tray, by the way. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.